When Daniel Moore dove into traffic to save a stranger's golden retriever on that freezing February night, he had no idea the dog's owner would become his boss the next morning, or that saving her beloved pet would ignite a romance that would threaten both their careers and force a struggling single father to prove his worth wasn't just handed to him by the woman he was falling for. This is a story about second chances, quiet courage, and the family we build when we refuse to give up. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe in stories where good people fight for what they deserve, hit that like button and stay until the end. You won't regret it. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through Daniel Moore's coat like a blade, sharp and unforgiving, the kind of cold that made February in Chicago feel personal. He pulled his collar tighter and kept walking, his breath forming small clouds that disappeared into the darkness. It was nearly 10 o'clock, and the riverfront was deserted except for the occasional jogger and the distant hum of traffic crossing the bridge overhead. Daniel had left his apartment 20 minutes ago, unable to sit still after tucking his daughter Emma into bed. She'd fallen asleep clutching the worn stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2, her small face peaceful in a way that made his chest ache. At 7 years old, she still asked sometimes when Mommy was coming home, even though it had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since Daniel's world had collapsed, and then slowly, painfully, begun to rebuild itself into something he barely recognized. He wasn't supposed to be here, not in Chicago, not starting over as a junior attorney at 34, not raising a daughter alone in a city where he knew almost no one. But life had a way of stripping away plans and leaving only necessity. The job at Morrison & Hart had been his lifeline, his chance to claw back some stability after years of survival mode. Tomorrow would be his first day, and the weight of it sat heavy in his stomach. The path along the river was dimly lit, street lamps casting orange pools of light across the concrete. Daniel had always found clarity in movement, in the rhythm of walking when his mind refused to quiet. Tonight his thoughts circled the same worn track. Whether he could actually do this job, whether he was good enough, whether Emma would adjust to her new school, whether he was failing her by working the long hours that corporate law demanded. A bark shattered the silence. Daniel stopped, turning toward the sound. It came again, frantic, high-pitched, desperate. Through the darkness, he saw movement near the bridge, a flash of golden fur streaking toward the road where cars rushed past in both directions. His body reacted before his mind caught up. Daniel ran. The dog, a golden retriever he could see now, was running blind with panic, headed straight for the intersection. Daniel's lungs burned as he sprinted, closing the distance, his focus narrowing to that single point of motion. The dog reached the curb just as the sedan rounded the corner, headlights sweeping across the street. Daniel lunged. His hand caught the dog's collar, and he yanked hard, throwing his weight backward. The retriever yelped as they both tumbled onto the sidewalk, the car's horn blaring as it swerved and sped past, missing them by inches. For a moment, Daniel just lay there on the cold concrete, the dog panting heavily against his chest, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. The adrenaline made everything sharp and clear, the rough texture of the dog's collar, the warmth of its body, the way it was trembling. "Easy," Daniel murmured, sitting up slowly. "You're okay. You're okay now." The retriever whined and pressed closer, and Daniel ran his hands over its fur, checking for injuries. The dog wore a collar with tags, and when Daniel turned them toward the streetlight, he saw a name, Bailey, and a phone number engraved on the metal. "Bailey, huh?" Daniel said quietly. The dog's tail gave a tentative wag. "What were you running from, girl?" He pulled out his phone and dialed the number, his hand still shaking slightly. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Daniel was about to hang up when a woman's voice answered, breathless and tight with worry. "Hello? Who is this?" "My name is Daniel Moore," he said quickly. "I'm on the riverfront near Columbus Drive. I just stopped your dog from running into traffic. She's okay, but she seems pretty scared." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "You have Bailey? Oh, thank God. Is she hurt?" "She seems fine. Shaken up, but no injuries that I can see." "Don't move." The woman's voice carried an edge of command even through the relief. "I'm 10 minutes away. Please, just stay with her." "I'm not going anywhere," Daniel assured her. "We'll be right here." The line went dead. Daniel looked down at Bailey, who had stopped trembling and was now sitting pressed against his leg, her warm weight solid and trusting. He scratched behind her ears and settled in to wait, watching the dark water of the Chicago River flow past, reflecting fragments of the city lights like broken stars. True to her word, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up exactly 9 minutes later, parking hastily at the curb with the kind of precision that spoke of someone who never wasted motion. The driver's door opened and a woman emerged. Daniel's first impression was of control, the kind of composure that radiated from people who commanded rooms without raising their voices. She was perhaps 40, with dark hair pulled back in a precise low bun, wearing a charcoal coat that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. Even in the dim streetlight, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes scanned the sidewalk until they found Bailey. And then the control shattered. "Bailey!" The woman's voice broke as she ran forward, dropping to her knees on the concrete without seeming to notice or care. The dog surged toward her, tail wagging frantically, and the woman wrapped her arms around the retriever's neck, her face pressed into golden fur. "Oh God, Bailey. Baby, I thought I'd lost you." Daniel stood back, giving them space, watching as the woman's shoulders shook. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet, and she was making no attempt to hide it. She looked up at Daniel, and he saw raw gratitude there, mixed with something that looked like residual fear. "Thank you." Her voice was unsteady. I can't thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Daniel said. "I'm just glad I was here." The woman stood slowly, one hand still resting on Bailey's head, as if she needed to maintain physical contact to believe the dog was real. Up close, Daniel could see that she was beautiful in a severe way, with sharp cheekbones and intelligent dark eyes that were currently red-rimmed from tears she wasn't bothering to wipe away. "How did she get out?" Daniel asked. "My housekeeper left the back gate unlatched." The woman's jaw tightened. "Bailey must have gone looking for me. I was working late, and she—" Her voice caught. "She's terrified of being alone. After my divorce, she's the one constant I have. If something had happened to her—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Daniel understood that kind of fear, the terror of losing the thing that kept you grounded when everything else fell apart. "But nothing happened," he said gently. "She's safe." The woman looked at him for a long moment, and Daniel had the uncanny sensation of being assessed, cataloged, and filed away with the same precision he'd noticed in everything else about her. Then she extended her hand. "Evelyn Hart." Daniel shook her hand, noting the firm grip, the calluses that suggested she worked with her hands more than her appearance might indicate. "Daniel Moore. It's nice to meet you, Ms. Hart, though I wish it were under better circumstances." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Evelyn, please. Ms. Hart is for the office." She paused, then seemed to make a decision. "Let me at least buy you coffee, or dinner, something to thank you properly for what you did." "That's really not necessary. I insist." There was that command again, softer now, but unmistakable. "Tomorrow evening, there's a restaurant near my office that makes an excellent steak. 7 o'clock? Daniel hesitated. He'd need to arrange for his neighbor to watch Emma, and his first day at the new job would likely leave him exhausted, but something about Evelyn Hart's directness made it hard to refuse. And truth be told, he could use a night out, a moment to feel like a person instead of just a father and an employee. "All right," he agreed. 7 o'clock. "Where should I meet you?" Evelyn pulled out her phone and sent him a text with the restaurant's address. "Don't be late," she said, and this time the smile was fuller, more genuine. "I have very little patience for tardiness." Noted. She loaded Bailey into the back seat of the Mercedes, giving the dog one more long embrace before closing the door. When she turned back to Daniel, the composure was settling back into place, the vulnerability retreating behind professional armor. "Tomorrow, then," she said. "Tomorrow," Daniel confirmed. He watched the Mercedes pull away, its taillights disappearing into the flow of traffic. Only then did he realize his hands had finally stopped shaking. He checked his watch, nearly 11 now. Emma would be fast asleep, and he needed to get home. But he found himself standing there a moment longer, looking out at the dark river and wondering what exactly had just happened. It was only later, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling while Emma slept in the room next door, that Daniel realized he hadn't asked Evelyn what she did for a living or where her office was located. It seemed like an odd omission, but exhaustion was pulling at him, and tomorrow was coming whether he was ready or not. He set his alarm for 6 and closed his eyes, unaware that fate had already made its move, that the threads of his life were about to weave together in ways he couldn't possibly predict. The Morrison and Hart building rose 40 stories above the Chicago Loop, glass and steel gleaming in the weak morning sunlight. Daniel stood on the sidewalk, briefcase in hand, looking up at the structure that would house his professional future. His stomach churned with familiar anxiety, the same feeling he'd had before his first court appearance, before Emma's first day of kindergarten, before every major threshold he'd crossed in the past 3 years. He'd dropped Emma at school an hour ago, watching her walk through the doors with her backpack and her brave smile, and he'd felt the usual stab of guilt at leaving her, even though he knew she'd be fine. She was resilient, his daughter. She'd had to be. The lobby was impressive in an understated way. Marble floors, modern art on the walls, a reception desk staffed by a young woman with perfect posture and a professional smile. "Daniel Moore," he said when he reached the desk. "I'm starting today in the litigation department." "Of course, Mr. Moore. Welcome to Morrison and Hart." She handed him a visitor badge and a folder. "Take the elevators to the 32nd floor. Ms. Chen from HR will meet you there." The elevator ride was smooth and swift. When the doors opened, Daniel stepped out into a reception area that spoke of serious money, leather furniture, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city that made his breath catch. A woman in her 50s approached, hand extended. "Mr. Moore? I'm Patricia Chen. Welcome aboard." Her handshake was firm, her smile warm. "I hope you're ready to hit the ground running. We don't believe in gentle introductions here." "I appreciate that," Daniel said, and he meant it. He'd take challenging work over coddling any day. Patricia led him through a maze of hallways, pointing out conference rooms, the library, the break room. Associates worked behind glass-walled offices, and Daniel caught glimpses of people hunched over computers, talking on phones, surrounded by stacks of documents. It looked like controlled chaos, and something in him responded to it. The energy, the purpose, the sense that the work mattered. "Your office is here," Patricia said, stopping at a door near the end of the hall. It was small but had a window, which Daniel hadn't expected. "You'll be working primarily with John Reeves initially. He's senior counsel on the Hartwell case. It's our biggest active litigation, so you're jumping into the deep end." "I'm ready," Daniel said. Patricia studied him for a moment, and he had the sense she was deciding whether to believe him. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded. "Good. John will come find you around 9 to get you oriented. In the meantime, make yourself comfortable. Computer login information is in your welcome packet." She left him there, and Daniel set down his briefcase, taking a moment to absorb the reality of where he was. His office was sparse: desk, chair, computer, empty bookshelves waiting to be filled. But it was his, earned through years of night school while working full-time, through the bar exam he'd passed on his second try, through every sacrifice he'd made to get here. He was unpacking his briefcase when a knock sounded at his door. A man stood there, mid-50s, graying hair, expensive suit, the kind of person who looked perpetually skeptical. "Daniel Moore?" the man asked. "That's me." "John Reeves. Welcome to the war zone." He didn't smile. "You have litigation experience?" 3 years at a small firm in Milwaukee, Daniel said. "Mostly civil litigation, some employment law." John made a non-committal sound. "Well, this isn't Milwaukee. The Hartwell case involves 8 figures and opposing counsel who would happily bury us in motions if we give them an opening. You'll be doing document review initially. I need someone who can spot inconsistencies and flag potential issues. Think you can handle that?" "Absolutely." "Good. Conference room 3 in 20 minutes. Bring coffee." "It's going to be a long day." John left without waiting for a response, and Daniel exhaled slowly. Not the warmest welcome, but he hadn't expected warmth. He'd expected to have to prove himself, and that was fine. He'd been proving himself his entire life. He was heading toward the break room when he heard his name called. Daniel turned to find Patricia hurrying toward him, slightly out of breath. "Mr. Moore, I almost forgot. Ms. Hart wanted to see you before you got too deep into your work. She likes to personally welcome new attorneys." Daniel's stomach did an odd flip. "Ms. Hart?" "Our managing partner. Her office is on the executive floor, 40th level. I'll take you up now if you have a moment." The pieces were clicking together with a slow, sinking certainty. Evelyn Hart, managing partner. The woman whose dog he'd saved last night, who he was supposed to meet for dinner tonight, was about to be introduced as his boss. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt longer than it should have. Patricia was talking about the firm's history, about Ms. Hart's reputation as one of the most formidable litigators in Chicago, but Daniel barely heard her. His mind was racing, recalculating, trying to figure out what this meant, whether he should mention their meeting last night or pretend it never happened. The executive floor was quieter, more refined. Patricia led him past assistants' desks to a corner office with double doors. She knocked once and opened them without waiting for a response. "Ms. Hart, Daniel Moore is here. Send him in." Patricia stepped aside and Daniel walked into an office that commanded respect through sheer presence. The space was enormous, with windows on two walls offering panoramic views of the city and the lake beyond. The furniture was modern and expensive, the art on the walls original pieces that probably cost more than Daniel's law school education. And behind the massive desk, rising to her feet with an expression that shifted from professional welcome to genuine shock in the space of a heartbeat, was Evelyn Hart. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Patricia, oblivious to the undercurrent, made the introduction. "Ms. Hart, this is Daniel Moore, our new junior attorney in litigation. Mr. Moore, Evelyn Hart, managing partner." Evelyn recovered first, her composure sliding back into place with practiced ease. "Mr. Moore, welcome to Morrison and Hart." She extended her hand across the desk, and Daniel shook it, acutely aware of Patricia watching. "Thank you, Ms. Hart. I'm honored to be here." "Patricia, thank you. I'll take it from here." It was a dismissal, polite but firm. Patricia left, closing the doors behind her, and suddenly the office felt much smaller. Evelyn sat down slowly, and Daniel remained standing, waiting. "Well," Evelyn said finally, "this is unexpected." "I had no idea," Daniel said quickly. "Last night, I didn't know who you were, where you worked." "I believe you." She leaned back in her chair, studying him with the same assessing gaze he remembered from the riverfront. "Sit down, Daniel, please." He sat, perching on the edge of one of the leather chairs facing her desk. The silence stretched between them, not quite uncomfortable but weighted with questions neither of them seemed ready to ask. "I should cancel dinner," Evelyn said abruptly. "It's inappropriate now. You work for me." "I understand," Daniel said, trying to ignore the flash of disappointment. "Of course." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "But I don't want to cancel. You saved Bailey's life. That deserves more than a handshake and a welcome packet." "Ms. Hart, Evelyn," she corrected. "At least when we're alone. This is complicated enough without adding excessive formality." Daniel took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "I appreciate the thought, truly, but I can't afford any perception that I'm receiving special treatment. I'm starting at the bottom here, and I need to earn my place on merit." Something flickered in Evelyn's eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "You have a daughter," she said, and Daniel's surprise must have shown on his face because she added, "I looked you up after last night. Due diligence. 7 years old, if the school records I found are current." "Emma," Daniel confirmed, unsettled by how thorough Evelyn's research had been. "I'm raising her alone." "Then you understand what it means to have something to lose." Evelyn's voice softened slightly. She's all I have left of my marriage that I actually wanted to keep. My ex-husband got the house in Lincoln Park, the vacation home in Door County, most of our mutual friends. I got the dog and the career. It seemed like a fair trade at the time. The vulnerability in her admission caught Daniel off guard. This wasn't the managing partner speaking. This was the woman who'd knelt on cold concrete and cried into her dog's fur. "I get it," Daniel said quietly. "After my wife died, Emma was the only thing that kept me from falling apart completely. Everything else was just noise." Evelyn nodded, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, two people who'd learned to build walls and weren't sure whether to lower them. "Dinner," Evelyn said finally. "One meal, as a thank you. After that, I'm your boss and you're my employee, and we maintain appropriate professional boundaries. Agreed?" Daniel knew he should say no. Every instinct warned him that getting personally involved with the managing partner, even for a single dinner, was a terrible idea. But something in Evelyn's expression stopped him, a loneliness that mirrored his own, a hunger for connection with someone who might actually understand. "Agreed," he said. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. She was smiling slightly now, and Daniel found himself smiling back. "Yes, ma'am." "Now get out of my office before someone starts wondering why the new junior attorney is getting a private audience with the managing partner on his first day." Daniel stood but hesitated at the door. "Evelyn?" "Yes?" "Thank you for the opportunity to work here. I won't waste it." "I don't think you will," she said, and he could hear the sincerity beneath the professional tone. "Now go find John before he decides you're not serious about the job." The rest of the day passed in a blur of names, faces, and information. John Reeves was exacting and impatient, but Daniel quickly realized the man was brilliant. His grasp of the Hartwell case was encyclopedic, his strategic thinking several moves ahead of opposing counsel. The document review was tedious but necessary, and Daniel threw himself into it with the focus that had gotten him through law school while working full-time and raising a toddler. By 6 o'clock, when most of the other associates were packing up, Daniel was still at his desk, making notes on inconsistencies he'd found in the deposition transcripts. He'd promised his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, that he'd pick Emma up by 7:30, which meant he had time to grab a quick dinner before heading home. Except he'd forgotten about his agreement with Evelyn. The realization hit him at 6:15, and Daniel swore under his breath. He pulled out his phone and texted his neighbor. "Emergency came up at work. Could you possibly keep Emma until 9? I'm so sorry for the short notice." Mrs. Chen's response came quickly. "No problem, Daniel. Emma is helping me make dumplings. Take your time." Relief washed through him. He shut down his computer, grabbed his coat, and took the elevator down to the lobby, his mind already shifting gears from work to the dinner ahead. The restaurant Evelyn had chosen was upscale, but not ostentatious, tucked into a quiet street in the Loop. Daniel arrived at 6:55, and the hostess informed him that Ms. Hart was already seated. She led him through a dining room of white tablecloths and low lighting to a corner table where Evelyn sat, looking somehow different out of her office environment, softer, more approachable, though still undeniably in command of her space. She'd changed from her work suit into dark slacks and a cream-colored blouse, and her hair was down, falling just past her shoulders in dark waves. Daniel felt underdressed in his work clothes, but Evelyn smiled as he approached, standing to greet him. "You made it," she said. "I'm a man of my word," Daniel replied, sitting across from her. They ordered steak for both of them, red wine for Evelyn, water for Daniel because he had to drive. And for a few minutes they made small talk about the restaurant, the weather, safe topics that didn't venture into personal territory. But as their meals arrived and they began to eat, the conversation deepened. "How was your first day?" Evelyn asked. "Intense. John Reeves doesn't believe in gentle learning curves. John's the best senior counsel we have. If he's working you hard, it means he thinks you can handle it." Evelyn cut into her steak with precision. "He doesn't waste time on people he doesn't think will make it. That's encouraging, I think." "It should be." She paused, then said, "Tell me about Emma." Daniel looked up, surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me. You mentioned your wife died. I'm sorry for your loss. That must have been incredibly difficult." It was an opening Daniel rarely got, an invitation to talk about the thing that had defined his life for the past 3 years. He found himself responding to Evelyn's quiet attention, her genuine interest. "Car accident," he said. 3 years ago in Milwaukee. We were driving home from dinner, and a drunk driver ran a red light. Sarah died at the scene. Emma and I survived with minor injuries, physically at least." He took a breath. "Everything after that was just survival mode. I was working as a paralegal, going to night school for my law degree, suddenly a single parent to a 4-year-old. I had to drop out for a semester just to keep us afloat." "But you went back," Evelyn said. "I went back. Because Sarah would have killed me if I'd given up. and because I needed to build something stable for Emma. My daughter deserves better than a father who's barely holding it together. You're doing more than holding it together, Evelyn said firmly. You finished your degree, passed the bar, got hired at a top firm. That's not survival, that's triumph. Daniel wasn't used to praise that direct, that unqualified. It made something in his chest loosen. What about you? He asked. You mentioned a divorce. Evelyn's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. 3 years ago, same as your loss. Though mine was more of a slow bleed than a sudden trauma. Richard, my ex-husband, couldn't handle being married to someone whose career eclipsed his. He wanted a wife who would scale back, maybe go in-house somewhere less demanding, be available for dinner parties and charity events. When I made managing partner, it was the beginning of the end. He asked you to give up your career? He suggested it would be better for our marriage. Evelyn's voice carried an edge of old anger, as if my ambition was a character flaw instead of what got me where I am. The divorce was brutal. He fought me on everything out of spite. By the time it was over, I'd won the firm but lost everything else I thought I was building. Except Bailey, Daniel said. Evelyn's face softened. Except Bailey. She was supposed to be our dog, but Richard didn't fight for custody, said he didn't have time for a pet in his new life. The bitterness in her voice was clear. So she became mine, and honestly, she's been better company than most humans I know. They both smiled at that, and Daniel felt the last of the awkwardness between them dissolve. Here, in this quiet corner of the restaurant, they weren't managing partner and junior attorney. They were two people who'd survived loss and were still figuring out how to rebuild. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. Why did you really insist on this dinner? Evelyn considered the question, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. Because when you saved Bailey last night, you didn't hesitate. You just acted. And when I thanked you, you didn't try to leverage it or make it into something it wasn't. You were just decent, kind. And I realized I don't encounter that very often in my world. Your world seems pretty isolated, Daniel observed. It is. When you're the boss, people treat you differently. They're careful, calculating. Even my friends, the ones I have left. There's always this awareness of my position, my power. It gets exhausting. I can imagine. Daniel paused. For what it's worth, I don't see you that way. How do you see me? It was a direct question, and it deserved a direct answer. As someone who's worked incredibly hard to get where you are. Someone who's lonely in a way that success doesn't fix. Someone who loves her dog enough to cry in front of a stranger. Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she blinked it away quickly. That's a very accurate assessment, Mr. Moore. Daniel, he corrected gently. Daniel, she smiled. I'm glad Bailey ran away last night. Even if it terrified me, it brought you into my orbit. That feels like something worth being grateful for. The moment hung between them, weighted with possibility and danger in equal measure. Daniel knew he should pull back, should remember that this woman was his boss, that getting involved would be complicated and potentially catastrophic. But sitting across from Evelyn Hart, seeing the vulnerability she kept hidden behind professional armor, he found he didn't want to pull back at all. I should get going, he said reluctantly, checking his watch. I need to pick up Emma. Of course. Evelyn signaled for the check, and when Daniel reached for his wallet, she waved him off. This is my thank you, remember? I'm paying. They walked out together into the cold night air. Evelyn's car was parked nearby, and they stood beside it for a moment, the city humming around them. Tomorrow, Evelyn said, when we're at the office. You're my boss, Daniel finished. I'm just another junior attorney. I understand. Good. But she didn't move to get in her car. Daniel? Yes? Thank you for dinner, for last night, for being someone I can talk to without feeling like I have to perform. Any time, Daniel said, and meant it. He watched her drive away, then walked to his own car, his mind full of contradictions. He'd come to Chicago to rebuild his life, to create stability for Emma, to prove he could make it in a world that had knocked him down repeatedly. Getting emotionally entangled with his boss wasn't part of that plan. But as Daniel drove through the city streets toward Mrs. Chen's apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling that some things couldn't be planned for, that fate had its own agenda, and that saving a golden retriever from traffic might have been the first step toward something he'd stopped believing in 3 years ago. Emma was awake when he arrived, covered in flour and grinning as Mrs. Chen handed her over. "We made dumplings, Daddy. Mrs. Chen said I was a natural." "I bet you were, sweetheart." Daniel hugged her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Ready to go home?" On the drive back to their apartment, Emma chattered about her day, the new friends she'd made at school, the art project they'd started, the book her teacher had read at story time. Daniel listened, responded, let her voice fill the silence, grateful as always for this bright, resilient little person who'd given him a reason to keep fighting when everything else had fallen apart. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel stood at his window looking out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about Evelyn Hart and the complications ahead, about second chances and the courage it took to reach for them. Tomorrow he'd go back to being a junior attorney, to proving himself through work and merit. But tonight, for just this moment, he let himself imagine possibilities he'd thought were dead and buried with his wife. The city glittered in the darkness, full of promise and peril, and Daniel felt something shift inside him, the first crack in the armor he'd built around his heart, the first whisper of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could have more than survival. He just had to be brave enough to reach for it. The first 2 weeks at Morrison and Hart passed in a controlled avalanche of work. Daniel arrived early and stayed late, absorbing everything John Reeves threw at him with a focus that bordered on obsessive. The Hartwell case was massive, a pharmaceutical company accused of suppressing clinical trial data, and the discovery alone involved tens of thousands of documents. Daniel read until his eyes burned, made notes until his hand cramped, and gradually began to see the patterns that John had been testing him to find. "You're not as slow as I thought you'd be," John said one Thursday afternoon, which Daniel had learned was high praise from a man who believed compliments bred complacency. "Thank you, I think." "Don't let it go to your head. You still miss things, but you're learning." John dropped another stack of files on Daniel's desk. "Depositions start next week. I want you observing, taking notes on witness credibility. Think you can handle that?" "Absolutely." What John didn't know, what Daniel was careful never to reveal, was that he worked through lunch most days, stayed until 9 or 10 at night after picking Emma up from Mrs. Chen's, then reviewed case materials after his daughter went to sleep. The schedule was brutal, but Daniel had lived through worse. And every night when he checked on Emma sleeping peacefully in her room, he reminded himself why he was doing this. He saw Evelyn exactly twice during those 2 weeks, both times in passing. Once in the hallway when she was walking with 2 senior partners, deep in conversation about a settlement negotiation. She'd glanced at Daniel as they passed, and he'd caught the briefest flicker of recognition in her eyes before her attention returned to the partners flanking her. The second time was in the lobby elevator. Daniel had gotten in on the 20th floor, and she'd been alone, reviewing something on her phone. They'd ridden down in silence, standing at opposite corners, the air between them heavy with everything they weren't saying. When the doors opened at the lobby, Evelyn had paused. "Good work on the Hartwell memo," she'd said quietly. "John showed it to me. Your analysis of the witness statements was sharp." "Thank you, Ms. Hart." She'd looked at him then, really looked at him, and Daniel had seen the same wariness he felt reflected in her expression, the awareness that they were walking a line neither of them fully understood. Then she'd stepped out into the lobby, her heels clicking against marble, and the moment was gone. Daniel tried not to think about their dinner, about the way Evelyn's guard had lowered over wine and steak, about the loneliness they'd both acknowledged. He tried to focus on work, on Emma, on building the stable life he'd promised himself. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and his mind wandered, he found himself remembering the way Evelyn had smiled at him, unguarded and genuine. On the Friday of his 3rd week, Daniel was preparing to leave when his desk phone rang. He almost didn't answer. It was after 7, and he'd promised Emma they'd get pizza on the way home. But ingrained professionalism made him pick up. "Daniel Moore." "Mr. Moore, this is Jessica from Ms. Hart's office." The voice was crisp, efficient. "Ms. Hart would like to see you. Are you still in the building?" Daniel's stomach tightened. "Yes, I'm here." "She'll see you now, 40th floor." The line went dead before Daniel could respond. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevators, his mind racing through possibilities. Had he made a mistake on something? Was this about their dinner 3 weeks ago? Had someone seen them together and drawn conclusions? The executive floor was quiet this late, most of the support staff gone for the weekend. Jessica, a woman in her 30s with severe glasses and an expression that suggested she tolerated no nonsense, gestured toward Evelyn's office. "Go ahead. She's expecting you." Daniel knocked once and entered. Evelyn stood at her windows, looking out at the city lights beginning to emerge in the dusk. She didn't turn when he came in. "Close the door, please." He did, the soft click seeming very loud in the quiet office. Evelyn finally turned, and Daniel saw tension in every line of her body. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," she said without preamble. "Have you told anyone about our dinner?" "No one," Daniel said immediately. "I wouldn't. Not even casually? Not a mention to another associate, not a comment to a friend?" "I don't have friends here yet, Ms. Hart, and I understand what's at stake if people think there's something inappropriate between us." Evelyn's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Good, because someone is asking questions." Daniel felt cold spread through his chest. "What kind of questions?" "Patricia Chen mentioned to me today that she'd heard from another HR staff member that the new junior attorney had gotten a personal welcome from me on his first day. She wanted to know if that was our new policy for all hires." Evelyn's jaw was tight. "I told her you'd made an impression during your interview process, and I wanted to personally ensure we made you feel valued." She seemed satisfied, but it reminded me how carefully we need to tread. "I understand." "Do you?" Evelyn moved closer, and Daniel caught a hint of her perfume, something subtle and expensive. "Because I'm not sure I do anymore. I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation, about how easy it was to talk to you, and that's dangerous for both of us." Daniel knew he should agree, should reinforce the boundaries they'd established. Instead, he heard himself say, "I haven't stopped thinking about it either." The admission hung between them. Evelyn's expression shifted, surprise, then something that looked like relief, then caution reasserting itself. "We can't do this," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know. You work for me. I'm your boss. Any relationship beyond professional would be completely inappropriate." "I know," Daniel repeated. "Then why are we still talking about it?" There was frustration in her voice now, directed at herself more than him. Daniel took a careful breath. "Because I think we both recognize something in each other, something that doesn't come along very often, and pretending that's not real doesn't make it go away." Evelyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're very direct, Mr. Moore. I learned a long time ago that life's too short for games. When my wife died, it taught me that nothing is guaranteed. So when something feels important, I don't ignore it. Even when it's complicated? Especially then." Evelyn studied him for a long moment. "I could fire you," she said finally. "It would solve the problem." "You could," Daniel agreed, "but you won't. Because I'm good at my job and you don't make decisions based on personal discomfort." A smile ghosted across her face. "You're very sure of yourself." "Not really. I'm terrified most of the time. But I'm also 34 years old, raising a daughter alone, and trying to build something that matters. I can't afford to be anything less than honest." Evelyn moved to her desk and sat down, gesturing for Daniel to take one of the chairs across from her. The shift felt deliberate, creating physical and psychological distance, reasserting the professional dynamic. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone he recognized from meetings. "We maintain absolute professionalism at work. No private conversations, no personal meetings, nothing that could be misconstrued. You continue to prove yourself through your work, and I continue to treat you exactly like every other junior associate." "Agreed." "But," Evelyn continued, and Daniel heard the hesitation in the word, "if we happen to encounter each other outside of work, at a restaurant, a park, somewhere public and unrelated to the firm, that would be coincidence, not a workplace interaction." Daniel understood what she was offering. "Coincidence," he repeated carefully. "Like running into each other at the riverfront on a Saturday morning. For example, I usually take my daughter for walks there on Saturdays, around 9 o'clock. She likes to watch the boats. I often walk Bailey around the same time, Evelyn said, her eyes meeting his. It's good exercise for her. They were both silent, acknowledging the line they were carefully stepping over while maintaining plausible deniability. It was a risk, one that could explode in both their faces if anyone connected the dots. But Daniel saw in Evelyn's expression the same hunger he felt, the same exhaustion with loneliness, the same cautious hope that maybe this didn't have to end before it began. I should go, Daniel said, standing. I promised my daughter pizza. How is Emma adjusting to Chicago? The question was casual, but Daniel heard the genuine interest beneath it. Better than I expected. She's made friends at school. My neighbor has been wonderful about watching her when I work late. She's resilient. She gets that from her father, I imagine. Daniel met Evelyn's gaze. She gets it from necessity. Kids are tougher than we give them credit for. I'll have to take your word for it. I never had children. Richard didn't want them. And by the time I might have pushed the issue, our marriage was already falling apart. There was regret in her voice, and Daniel felt an unexpected wave of sympathy. It's not too late. You're what, 40? 41. And realistically, it is too late. I work 80 hours a week. I'm divorced. I can barely keep a plant alive, let alone raise a child. You keep Bailey alive, Daniel pointed out, and you're clearly devoted to her. That's different. Not as different as you think. Both require commitment, consistency, love. You have those in you. I saw it that night on the riverfront. Evelyn looked down at her hands. You see things in me I'm not sure exist anymore. Then I see clearer than you do. She looked up, and something in her expression made Daniel's breath catch. Vulnerability, raw and undefended, the kind that people like Evelyn Hart spent years learning to hide. Saturday, she said quietly, 9 o'clock, riverfront near the bridge. We'll be there. Daniel left her office feeling like he'd crossed a threshold he couldn't uncross. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, and when he stepped out into the lobby, the evening air hit him like a wake-up call. He was playing with fire. He knew that. Getting involved with Evelyn could destroy his career, could destabilize the life he was trying to build for Emma. But walking away felt impossible, like denying gravity or trying not to breathe. He picked up Emma from Mrs. Chen's apartment, endured her excited chatter about the spelling test she'd aced, and drove to their favorite pizza place. Over cheese slices and soda, his daughter talked about her week, and Daniel listened with half his attention while the other half replayed every word of his conversation with Evelyn. Daddy, you're not listening, Emma said, pulling him back to the present. I'm sorry, sweetheart. What did you say? I said, can we go to the river tomorrow morning, like we used to in Milwaukee? Daniel's chest tightened at the synchronicity. Actually, I was thinking the same thing. How does 9 o'clock sound? Emma's face lit up. Really? Can I bring my bike? Absolutely. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel stood at his window looking out at the city, wondering if Evelyn was doing the same thing from her much more expensive view 40 floors above the Loop. He wondered if she was second-guessing their plan, if she was lying awake running through all the ways this could go wrong. He wondered if she felt the same pull he did, the same reckless hope. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Don't overthink this. See you tomorrow. E. Daniel stared at the message, then typed back, too late, already overthinking. See you at 9. Her response came quickly. Good, I'd be worried if you weren't. He fell asleep that night with his phone on his nightstand, a small smile on his face, and a sense that his carefully controlled life was about to become significantly more complicated. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter day that made Chicago feel both brutal and beautiful. Daniel dressed Emma in her warmest coat, made sure she had gloves and a hat, and loaded her bike into the car. On the drive to the riverfront, she sang along to the radio, and Daniel felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came from loving someone so much it physically hurt. Daddy, can we get hot chocolate after? Emma asked as they parked. Sure, sweetheart, but let's walk first, okay? Work up an appetite. They headed toward the path along the river, Emma riding her bike in wobbly circles while Daniel walked beside her. The riverfront was moderately busy, joggers, dog walkers, couples strolling hand in hand. Daniel checked his watch, 8:55. His stomach was doing uncomfortable things. And then he saw her. Evelyn was walking toward them from the opposite direction, Bailey on a leash beside her. She was dressed casually, jeans, a black coat, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without the armor of her work clothes, she looked younger, more approachable, though no less beautiful. Bailey saw them first. The dog's tail started wagging, and she pulled against the leash, clearly recognizing Daniel. Evelyn let her approach, and Bailey went straight to Daniel, nuzzling his hand. "Well, hello again," Daniel said, scratching behind the dog's ears. Emma had stopped her bike and was watching with wide eyes. "Daddy? Whose dog is that?" "This is Bailey," Daniel said. "I helped her owner find her a few weeks ago when she got lost." Evelyn had caught up, her expression carefully neutral. "Hello." "Hi," Daniel said. "Emma, this is Ms. Hart. Ms. Hart, my daughter Emma." Emma, who'd inherited her mother's social ease, gave a little wave. "Hi, your dog is really pretty." "Thank you," Evelyn said, and Daniel heard her voice soften. "Her name is Bailey. Would you like to pet her?" "Can I?" Emma looked at Daniel for permission, and he nodded. She got off her bike carefully and approached Bailey, who sat perfectly still while Emma ran her small hands over golden fur. "She's so soft," Emma breathed. "Daddy, can we get a dog?" "We'll see, sweetheart." "That means no," Emma said to Evelyn with the resigned wisdom of 7-year-olds everywhere, and Evelyn laughed. "It might mean not yet," Evelyn suggested. "Sometimes good things take time." Emma considered this, then returned her attention to Bailey. "Does she do tricks?" "A few. Would you like to see?" For the next 10 minutes, Evelyn put Bailey through her paces. Sit, stay, shake, roll over, while Emma watched in delight. Daniel stood back, observing, and what he saw made something in his chest ache. Evelyn was patient with Emma, encouraging, her usual controlled demeanor relaxed into something approaching warmth. And Emma responded to it, asking questions, laughing, completely at ease. "Can Bailey walk with us?" Emma asked finally. "Please?" Evelyn looked at Daniel, a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly. "I think Bailey would like that," Evelyn said. "If it's all right with your dad." They fell into step together, Emma riding ahead on her bike while Bailey trotted beside her, Evelyn and Daniel following at a distance that allowed for conversation. "She's wonderful," Evelyn said quietly. "You've done an amazing job with her." "She makes it easy. She's always been resilient, even when things were hardest." "Does she remember her mother?" It was a delicate question, and Daniel appreciated that Evelyn asked it. "Some. She remembers feelings more than specifics, remembers feeling loved, feeling safe. I talk about Sarah with her, keep her mother present. It's important that Emma knows where she came from." "That's generous of you. Some people would want to move on, start fresh." "Sarah was half of Emma. How could I erase that?" Daniel paused. "Besides, I don't believe in pretending the past didn't happen. It shapes us. Ignoring it doesn't make it less real." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Emma and Bailey ahead of them. The morning sun glinted off the river, and the city felt almost peaceful. "This is nice," Evelyn said finally. "Just being, not performing or managing or strategizing, just existing." "Is that rare for you?" "It's almost non-existent. I can't remember the last time I did something this simple without an agenda." She glanced at him. "Even this has an agenda, technically." "Does it?" "We both know this isn't coincidence, Daniel. We orchestrated it. We're testing something." He couldn't argue with that. "And what's the verdict so far?" Evelyn watched Emma, who'd stopped to point out a boat to Bailey. "It's dangerous," she said softly, "because it feels right. And things that feel this right are usually the things that destroy us. Or save us. You're an optimist. I'm a realist. I know the risks, but I also know that life's too short to run from something good just because it's complicated." Emma came riding back, breathless and grinning. "Ms. Hart, Bailey is the best dog ever. Does she like kids?" "She loves kids," Evelyn said. "She volunteers as a therapy dog at Children's Memorial Hospital once a month." "Really?" Emma's eyes went wide. "That's so cool. What does she do there?" "She visits children who are sick and helps them feel better. Sometimes just petting a dog can make someone feel less scared or sad. Emma absorbed this with serious consideration. That's really important work. Bailey is basically a hero. I think so too, Evelyn agreed, and Daniel saw her blink rapidly, touched by Emma's earnestness. They walked for another hour, stopping for hot chocolate at a cafe near the water. Emma chattered away, completely comfortable, asking Evelyn about Bailey and her job and whether she liked living in Chicago. Evelyn answered with more patience than Daniel had expected, never condescending, treating Emma's questions with the same respect she'd give an adult. When they finally parted ways, Emma hugged Bailey goodbye and thanked Evelyn profusely. "Can we see them again?" Emma asked as they walked back to the car. "I really like Ms. Hart, and Bailey is the best." Daniel's heart clenched. "Maybe, sweetheart, but Ms. Hart is very busy with work." "She said she walks Bailey every Saturday at 9, Emma pointed out with the logic of childhood. "So maybe we'll just accidentally see them again." "Maybe we will." That afternoon, while Emma napped, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. "She's remarkable. You should be very proud." He typed back, "I am. Thank you for being so kind to her." "It wasn't kindness. I genuinely enjoyed her company. She's real in a way most people aren't." Daniel stared at that message for a long time, understanding what Evelyn wasn't saying, that she was lonely, that genuine connection was rare in her world, that this morning had meant something to her beyond the testing of their attraction. "Same time next week?" he typed. The response took longer this time, and Daniel could imagine Evelyn weighing the decision, calculating the risks. Finally, "Yes, same time." Over the following weeks, Saturday mornings became their ritual. They'd meet at the riverfront, walk with Emma and Bailey, stop for hot chocolate, talk about everything except work. Evelyn and Emma formed an unexpected bond. The childless executive and the 7-year-old building a relationship based on mutual affection for a golden retriever and a growing genuine fondness. Daniel watched it happen with a mixture of joy and terror. Joy because seeing Evelyn laugh at Emma's jokes, seeing his daughter light up when they spotted Bailey, felt like watching his fractured world knit itself into something whole. Terror because he knew how much it would hurt Emma if this fell apart, knew that he was gambling with his daughter's heart as much as his own. At work, they maintained absolute professionalism. Daniel rarely saw Evelyn in the office, and when he did, their interactions were brief and formal. He threw himself into the Hartwell case with renewed intensity, determined to prove that any success he achieved was earned through merit, not favoritism. The depositions began in late March, and Daniel spent long days in conference rooms watching John Reeves methodically dismantle witness testimony. He took notes, spotted inconsistencies, and gradually began to understand the deeper strategy at play. One evening, after a particularly brutal deposition, John actually smiled at him. "You're developing an instinct for this," John said. "I had my doubts initially, but you might actually make a decent litigator." Coming from John, it was practically a standing ovation. Daniel went home that night feeling like maybe, just maybe, he was building something real, professionally and personally. But he should have known that nothing good came without a price. The hammer fell on a rainy Tuesday in early April, and it came from a source Daniel hadn't anticipated. He was in his office reviewing discovery documents when his phone rang. Internal extension, not one he recognized. "Daniel Moore. Mr. Moore, this is Richard Blackwood from Senior Partnership. Could you come to the 42nd floor conference room? We need to speak with you." The tone was neutral, but something in it made Daniel's stomach drop. "When?" "Now, please." Daniel saved his work and headed upstairs, his mind racing. The 42nd floor housed the senior partners, the people who made decisions about the firm's direction, about promotions and terminations. Being summoned there was never casual. The conference room was intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive table, leather chairs that probably cost more than Daniel's car. 3 senior partners sat waiting: Richard Blackwood, Margaret Oakes, and Thomas Werner. Their expressions ranged from stern to carefully neutral. "Sit down, Mr. Moore," Blackwood said. Daniel sat, keeping his spine straight, his expression calm. Whatever this was, he wouldn't show fear. "We've received some concerns," Blackwood began, "about your relationship with Ms. Hart." The words hit like ice water. Daniel forced himself to breathe normally. What kind of concerns? That there may be an inappropriate personal relationship influencing professional decisions. Margaret Oakes leaned forward. Specifically, that you've been seen with Ms. Hart outside of work on multiple occasions, and that your rapid integration into the Hartwell case may be the result of favoritism rather than merit. Daniel's mind raced. Someone had seen them. Someone had connected the dots. Who made these accusations? That's not relevant, Thomas Werner said. What's relevant is whether there's truth to them. Ms. Hart and I have maintained a strictly professional relationship at work, Daniel said carefully. If we've encountered each other outside the office, it's been coincidental. I live near the riverfront, so does she. Sometimes paths cross in a city this size. Coincidental, Blackwood repeated, his tone suggesting he didn't believe it. Multiple coincidental encounters, enough that they've been noticed and remarked upon. I can't control what people choose to notice or remark upon. I can only control my own actions. Daniel met each partner's gaze in turn. I've worked harder than anyone in my class of associates. I stay late, come in early, and I produce quality work. John Reeves can attest to that. If you're questioning whether I've earned my place on the Hartwell case, ask him. We intend to, Margaret said. But understand, Mr. Moore, this firm has zero tolerance for conflicts of interest. If we determine that Ms. Hart has shown you favoritism, it will impact both of your careers. The threat was clear. Daniel felt anger rise but forced it down. I understand. Is there anything else? We'll be conducting a review, Blackwood said. In the meantime, we strongly suggest you avoid any appearance of impropriety. No more coincidental encounters. No private meetings with Ms. Hart, unless there's a work-related purpose and a witness present. Are we clear? Crystal clear? You're dismissed. Daniel walked out of that conference room feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Someone was actively trying to sabotage him, and Evelyn. Someone had been watching, waiting, collecting evidence. He went straight to his office and pulled out his phone, typing a message to Evelyn. We need to talk, not at work, tonight, if possible. Her response came 10 minutes later. My place. 8 p.m. I'll text you the address. The rest of the day crawled past. Daniel couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except who might have seen them and why they were weaponizing it. By the time 8 o'clock arrived, he'd worked himself into a state of controlled fury. Evelyn's townhouse was in Lincoln Park, an elegant brick building that screamed old money and good taste. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater, her face tight with stress. They called you in too? Daniel asked as soon as the door closed. This afternoon. Same questions, same veiled threats. Evelyn led him into a living room that was surprisingly warm. Books on the shelves, comfortable furniture, Bailey asleep on a dog bed by the fireplace. Someone is building a case against us. Who? I have suspicions. There are partners who resented my appointment as managing partner, who think I'm too young, too aggressive, too female. Evelyn's voice was hard. This would be a perfect way to undermine me, prove I'm letting personal feelings cloud my professional judgment. But we haven't done anything wrong, Daniel said. We've been careful. Perception doesn't care about truth. If enough people believe there's impropriety, it becomes real whether it happened or not. Evelyn sank onto the couch, and for the first time since Daniel had met her, she looked defeated. I should never have let this happen. I knew better. I knew the risks. Daniel sat beside her, careful to maintain space between them. So what do? We stop, completely. No more Saturday mornings, no more texts, no contact outside of work unless it's absolutely necessary and documented. She looked at him, and he saw pain in her eyes. We protect your career and my authority by cutting this off before it goes any further. That's the safe choice, Daniel said slowly. The smart choice. But I don't want to make it. The admission came out rougher than he'd intended. I don't want to walk away from this. From you. Evelyn closed her eyes. Daniel, I know what I'm risking. My job, my stability, Emma's security, I know all of it. But I also know that what we have is real, and real is rare enough that walking away from it feels like a different kind of failure. You're thinking with your heart, not your head. Maybe. Or maybe I learned that life's too short to make every decision based on fear. Daniel shifted closer. Tell me you don't feel this too. Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll walk away right now. Evelyn opened her eyes, and he saw the war happening behind them. Duty versus desire, caution versus courage. I can't tell you that, she whispered. I can't tell you that because it would be a lie. The air between them felt electric. They'd skirted around this for weeks, maintaining careful distance, but now all the barriers were crumbling. Evelyn reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched Daniel's face. This is such a bad idea, she murmured. Probably the worst, he agreed. And then she kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing this new territory. But hunger built quickly, weeks of restraint breaking down, loneliness finding its answer, two people who'd been holding themselves together finally allowing themselves to come undone. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn's eyes were wide. We can't do this halfway, she said. If we're going to try, we have to be all in, and we have to be smart about it. Agreed. So how do we handle this? Evelyn's mind was already working. Daniel could see it. We document everything at work, every assignment, every conversation, everything that could be questioned. We maintain absolute professionalism in the office, and we prove beyond any possible doubt that you've earned your place on merit alone. The Hartwell case, Daniel said, understanding. If I can contribute something significant to that case, something that clearly demonstrates my value, it would neutralize the favoritism accusations. Evelyn nodded. But it has to be genuine. I can't hand you the win. You have to earn it. I will. I'll work harder than anyone. I'll find something that makes a difference. They sat together on the couch, Bailey padding over to rest her head on Daniel's knee. Outside, the Chicago night pressed against the windows, and inside, two people who'd been alone for far too long allowed themselves to imagine a different future. This is going to be hard, Evelyn said. Harder than anything either of us has done. I know, but I'm not afraid of hard. I'm afraid of regret. She kissed him again, softer this time, and Daniel felt something in his chest that he'd thought was dead finally stir back to life. Hope, fragile and fierce, that maybe second chances were real, that maybe love could find you even when you weren't looking for it. The battle ahead would be brutal, he knew that. But sitting there with Evelyn, Bailey warm against his leg, the city lights glittering beyond the windows, Daniel Moore decided that some things were worth fighting for, even if the fight might destroy him, especially then. Daniel left Evelyn's townhouse just after midnight, his mind racing with equal parts exhilaration and dread. The kiss had changed everything, transformed their careful dance into something undeniable and dangerous. As he drove through the empty Chicago streets toward his apartment, he replayed their conversation, the way Evelyn's walls had finally come down, the vulnerability in her eyes when she'd admitted she felt this too. But vulnerability didn't pay bills or protect careers. Strategy did, and they'd need every ounce of strategic thinking to survive what was coming. Emma was asleep when he got home, Mrs. Chen dozing on the couch with the television playing quietly. Daniel paid her extra for the late night and thanked her profusely, then stood in Emma's doorway watching his daughter sleep, her small chest rising and falling with peaceful rhythm. Everything he did now would impact her. Every choice, every risk. The weight of that responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Daniel was at his desk by 7, determined to prove himself through sheer force of will and meticulous work. He'd spent Sunday night reviewing every document in the Hartwell case again, looking for angles others might have missed, connections that could shift their strategy. John Reeves appeared at his door at 8:30, coffee in hand, his expression unreadable. Conference room, now. Bring everything you have on the witness depositions. Daniel gathered his files and followed, his pulse quickening. The conference room was already occupied. John, 2 other senior attorneys, and a video screen showing Margaret Oakes from the senior partnership. Mr. Moore, Margaret said from the screen, her tone clipped. John tells us you've been doing exceptional work on document analysis. We'd like to hear your assessment of the deposition testimony directly. This was a test. Daniel understood that immediately. They were evaluating whether he'd actually earned his position or whether Evelyn had been inflating his contributions. Of course. Daniel opened his primary file, forcing his voice to remain steady and professional. The key issue is consistency. The plaintiff's witnesses claim they raised concerns about the clinical trial data in 2023, but their email records show significant gaps in that timeline. Specifically, Dr. Patricia Henderson testified that she sent multiple warnings to senior management between March and June of 2023, but we've only recovered 2 emails from that period, both vague and nonspecific. That could just be incomplete document preservation, one of the senior attorneys said. Possibly. But Dr. Henderson's email habits show a different pattern. In every other area of her work, she's meticulous about documentation. She sends follow-up emails, confirmation requests, detailed summaries. But suddenly, on the most critical issue in this case, she becomes vague and sparse. That's inconsistent with her established behavior. Margaret leaned forward on the screen. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting her testimony is either exaggerated or fabricated, and I think we can prove it through pattern analysis of her communication style across different issues. If we can show a jury that her alleged warnings don't match her documented professional habits, we undermine her credibility on the central claim. The room was quiet for a moment. John was nodding slowly, and Daniel saw a flicker of approval in his expression. That's solid reasoning, Margaret said finally. Have you documented this analysis? I have a preliminary memo prepared. I can have a full report on your desk by end of day. Do that. Margaret's gaze was sharp, assessing. And Mr. Moore? This is the kind of work we expect from all our associates, regardless of who they know. The message was clear. Daniel met her eyes through the screen. Understood, ma'am. I have no interest in special treatment. I'm here to do the work. After the meeting ended and the others filed out, John lingered, closing the conference room door. You're being scrutinized, he said without preamble. I assume you know why. I have some idea. Whatever is or isn't happening between you and Evelyn Hart is your business. But it becomes my business when it affects this case. I need to know, can you handle the pressure? Because if you're going to crack under it, I'd rather know now. Daniel appreciated the directness. I won't crack, and I won't let anything compromise this case. You have my word on that. John studied him for a long moment. Your analysis this morning was sharp. That pattern recognition, that's the kind of thinking that wins cases. Keep producing work like that, and no one can touch you. That's the plan. Good. Because I'm putting you on the witness prep team for Dr. Henderson's cross-examination. You found the weakness. You help exploit it. It was an opportunity and a test rolled into one. Daniel felt a surge of determination. Thank you. I won't let you down. The next 2 weeks blurred into a relentless cycle of work. Daniel arrived before dawn and stayed past midnight, building the case against Dr. Henderson's credibility. He cross-referenced hundreds of her emails, documented her communication patterns, created visual presentations showing the stark contrast between her normal, meticulous style and her sudden vagueness on the critical issue. He worked with a focus that bordered on obsessive, driven by the need to prove himself and protect what he and Evelyn were building. He saw Evelyn exactly 3 times during those 2 weeks, always in professional settings with witnesses present, once in the elevator with 2 other associates, once passing in the hallway while she was talking with clients, once in a large firm meeting where she presented quarterly results, and he sat in the back row taking notes. Each time, their eyes met for the briefest moment, and Daniel felt the electric current of everything unsaid running between them. At home, Emma noticed his exhaustion. Daddy, are you okay? You look really tired. Just working hard, sweetheart, but it's important work. Is it helping people? The question stopped him. Emma had inherited her mother's moral clarity, her sense that work should matter beyond just earning money. Yes, Daniel said, realizing it was true. We're making sure a big company can't lie about whether their medicine is safe. That helps a lot of people. Emma considered this seriously. That's good, but you should still sleep more. Mrs. Chen says you work too much. Mrs. Chen worries too much. She says that's what neighbors are for. Daniel hugged his daughter close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, grounding himself in what mattered most. How about this weekend we take a break from the river and do something fun, just you and me? Emma's face lit up. Really? Can we go to the Science Museum? They have a new dinosaur exhibit. Absolutely. Saturday, all day. Just us. But when Saturday came, Daniel's phone rang at 7 in the morning. John Reeves, his voice tight with urgency. We have a problem. Dr. Henderson's attorney just filed a motion to exclude your pattern analysis. They're calling it speculative and prejudicial. Emergency hearing is Monday morning, and we need our response filed by Sunday evening. I need you at the office in an hour. Daniel looked at Emma, still asleep in her bed, and felt the familiar tear between duty and fatherhood. I'll be there. He called Mrs. Chen, who agreed to take Emma for the day, despite it being her own day off. When Emma woke up and learned their plans were canceled, her disappointment cut through him like a blade. You promised, she said quietly, and that was somehow worse than if she'd cried or yelled. I know, baby, I'm so sorry, but this is really important for work, and I have to go. We'll go next Saturday, I promise. You said that last time. Daniel knelt in front of her, taking her small hands in his. You're right. I did. And I'm going to do better. But right now, I need you to understand that sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices. This job, it's what keeps us safe, keeps us in this apartment, keeps you in your school with your friends. I wish I could be two places at once, but I can't. Emma's lower lip trembled, but she nodded. She was 7 years old and already learning that sometimes love meant accepting disappointment. Daniel hated that she had to learn it so young. At the office, he found John already deep in the motion, surrounded by legal precedents and case files. They worked straight through the day, building their response, arguing over language, refining their argument. Around 6, Evelyn appeared in the conference room doorway. I heard about the motion. How bad is it? Manageable, John said. Daniel's work is solid. We just need to frame it properly. Evelyn's gaze moved to Daniel, and he saw concern there, carefully masked but present. Do you need additional resources? We're good, Daniel said, keeping his voice professional. We'll have the response filed on time. Good. She hesitated at the door. Don't stay too late. You both need to be sharp for Monday. After she left, John glanced at Daniel. She doesn't usually check on work like this personally. That's what department heads are for. Maybe she's being thorough given the scrutiny on the case. Maybe. John didn't sound convinced, but he dropped it. They worked until nearly midnight. When Daniel finally got home, Mrs. Chen had left a note saying Emma had gone to bed sad but hadn't cried. He stood in his daughter's doorway, watching her sleep, and felt the weight of every choice he was making pressing down on his chest. His phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. I know today was hard. For what it's worth, your work is exceptional. He typed back. Had to cancel plans with Emma. She's 7. She doesn't understand why work matters more than dinosaurs. It doesn't. But sometimes we have to choose anyway. That's what makes us human instead of perfect. Daniel stared at those words, finding small comfort in them. Monday will be difficult. Monday, you'll be brilliant. Get some sleep. He wanted to call her, to hear her voice instead of just reading words on a screen, but it was too risky, too likely someone would notice phone records or overhear. So he settled for typing. Good night, Evelyn. Good night, Daniel. We'll get through this. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of weather that matched Daniel's mood. He dressed carefully in his best suit, the one he'd bought specifically for court appearances, and mentally rehearsed his arguments. The hearing was at 10, which gave him time to review everything one more time, to make sure he hadn't missed anything. At the office, John was already in war mode, his focus absolute. Remember, keep your answers direct and don't let their attorney bait you into speculation. Stick to what the data shows. The courthouse was downtown, a massive stone building that spoke of law's weight and permanence. Daniel had been here before for smaller hearings, but this felt different. This was his reputation on the line, his analysis being challenged, his future hanging on whether he could defend his work under scrutiny. The hearing room was smaller than he'd expected, more intimate. Judge Patricia Reeves, no relation to John, presided, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and an expression that suggested she had very little patience for nonsense. Dr. Henderson's attorney was already there, a slick corporate lawyer named Marcus Webb who had a reputation for aggressive tactics. When their case was called, John presented their response, walking the judge through Daniel's analysis methodically. Then it was Marcus Webb's turn. Your Honor, this so-called pattern analysis is nothing more than speculation dressed up as expertise. Mr. Moore here, he gestured dismissively toward Daniel, is a junior attorney with minimal experience who's attempting to psychoanalyze my client based on email habits. It's prejudicial, it's unreliable, and it should be excluded. Judge Reeves looked at Daniel. Mr. Moore, you prepared this analysis? Daniel stood. Yes, Your Honor. And your background is? 3 years at a civil litigation firm in Milwaukee, focusing on employment and business disputes. JD from Marquette University Law School. So you're not a psychologist or a communications expert? No, Your Honor, but I'm not claiming to be. This analysis doesn't rely on psychology. It relies on documented patterns in professional communication that any reasonable person can observe and verify. Explain. Daniel had prepared for this. Dr. Henderson's job required meticulous documentation. When she dealt with routine matters, equipment purchases, staffing issues, budget requests, her emails averaged 300 words and included specific dates, dollar amounts, and action items. She followed up consistently, often multiple times. But when it comes to her alleged warnings about clinical trial safety, suddenly her emails become brief, vague, and sporadic. She claims she sent multiple detailed warnings, but we can only find 2 emails, both under 50 words and containing no specific data or action requests. That's not psychology, Your Honor. That's observable inconsistency. And what's your explanation for this inconsistency? Either the warnings didn't happen as described, or they weren't as urgent as she now claims. Either way, it undermines the credibility of her testimony on the central issue in this case. Judge Reeves was quiet for a moment, reviewing the materials in front of her. Marcus Webb jumped in. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of speculation. I can read, Mr. Webb, the judge said sharply. Mr. Moore, did you document the baseline communication patterns you're comparing against? Extensively, Your Honor. We have a complete analysis of Dr. Henderson's email communications over a 3-year period, categorized by subject matter and urgency level. The contrast is stark and statistically significant. And this analysis? It's available for cross-examination? Absolutely. We've provided complete documentation in our response. Judge Reeves looked between both attorneys. I'm going to allow the analysis, subject to voir dire, of Mr. Moore at trial regarding his methodology. Mr. Webb, you'll have full opportunity to challenge it then. But based on what I'm seeing, this is proper impeachment evidence, not speculative psychology. Motion denied. The gavel came down, and Daniel felt something release in his chest. John was already gathering their materials, his expression satisfied. Outside the courthouse, John clapped Daniel on the shoulder. Well done. You held up under pressure. Thank you. I was terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Overconfidence gets you killed. They were walking back to the office when John's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then his expression darkened. We'll be right there. What's wrong? That was Margaret Oakes. The senior partners want to see both of us. Now. The ride up to the 42nd floor felt ominous. When they entered the conference room, all 5 senior partners were present, an unprecedented show of force. And sitting at the end of the table, her face carefully neutral, was Evelyn. Richard Blackwood didn't waste time on pleasantries. We've received additional allegations regarding Mr. Moore's relationship with Ms. Hart, specifically that they've been seen together at her residence on multiple occasions and that Ms. Hart has been providing Mr. Moore with preferential access to case strategy. Daniel's blood ran cold. Someone had been watching Evelyn's house. Someone was building a comprehensive case against them. These are serious allegations, Margaret Oakes said. They go beyond appearance of impropriety and into actual conflict of interest. Mr. Moore, do you have a personal relationship with Ms. Hart? The question hung in the air. Daniel looked at Evelyn, saw her sitting perfectly still, her expression giving away nothing. He could lie, could deny everything, and maybe they'd both survive professionally. Or he could tell the truth and let the consequences fall where they would. Ms. Hart and I have developed a friendship, he said carefully. We've encountered each other outside of work, yes, but she has provided me with zero preferential treatment. Every assignment I've received has been through John Reeves. Every piece of work I've produced has been my own. My analysis that won this morning's hearing, that was my work, my research, my argument. No one handed that to me. A friendship, Thomas Werner repeated skeptically. That requires multiple visits to her home? I've been to Ms. Hart's home twice, Daniel said, deciding that partial truth was his best option. Once to return something she'd left at a coffee shop where we'd run into each other. Once when she invited me to discuss career mentorship. Both times were brief and professional. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Evelyn's expression remained unchanged, giving him no indication whether he was helping or hurting. John, Blackwood said, you've worked closely with Mr. Moore. Has he received any preferential treatment that you've observed? John looked at Daniel for a long moment. No. If anything, I've worked him harder than most junior associates because his analysis has been sharp enough to warrant it. What he did this morning in court, that was all him. I supervised, but the insight was his. And his assignment to the Hartwell case? Was my decision based on his document review work. I needed someone detail-oriented who could spot patterns. He delivered. Margaret turned to Evelyn. Ms. Hart, do you have a personal relationship with Mr. Moore? Evelyn met the question head-on, her voice steady. Mr. Moore saved my dog from being hit by a car several months ago. I was grateful, and yes, we developed a cordial acquaintance, but I've maintained strict professional boundaries regarding his career. I have not assigned him work, reviewed his performance, or intervened in any personnel decisions affecting him. His success or failure here is entirely his own. It was masterfully worded, acknowledging connection while denying impropriety. Daniel had to admire her composure even as his own stomach churned. Blackwood looked unsatisfied but uncertain. Nevertheless, the appearance here is problematic. Mr. Moore, effective immediately, you're being reassigned off the Hartwell case. You'll be moved to a different department under different supervision until we can complete a thorough review. That's not necessary, John said sharply. He's done nothing wrong, and we need him on Hartwell. Trial starts in 6 weeks. The decision is made, Blackwood said firmly. Ms. Hart, you'll recuse yourself from any personnel decisions involving Mr. Moore going forward. Are we clear? Perfectly clear, Evelyn said, her voice like ice. Then we're done here. Mr. Moore, report to Stephen Chang in the corporate department tomorrow morning. They were dismissed. Daniel stood on shaking legs and walked out, John following him, arguing with the senior partners behind them. In the hallway, Evelyn caught up to him. My office. Now. He followed her, aware that this was probably the worst possible time for a private meeting, but unable to refuse. Once her door closed, Evelyn's composure cracked. I'm so sorry. I should have seen this coming, should have protected you better. This isn't your fault, Daniel said. Someone is gunning for both of us, and they're being methodical about it. It's someone with resources. Someone who hired a private investigator to watch my house, to document our movements. Evelyn's hands were shaking. Daniel, this could destroy your career before it even starts. Or it could prove that I earned my place through merit. He moved closer. That hearing this morning, I won that. Not because of you, not because of favoritism, because I did the work and I was good enough. That matters. You're being reassigned to corporate. You'll hate it. It's contracts and mergers, nothing like litigation. Then I'll find a way to excel at contracts and mergers. And when this review is complete and they find nothing improper, because there's nothing to find, I'll have proven myself in multiple departments. That makes me more valuable, not less. Evelyn looked at him like he was crazy. How are you so calm about this? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But I learned a long time ago that falling apart doesn't solve problems. Action does. Daniel took a breath. We knew this would be hard. We knew people would come after us. So we fight. We document everything. We maintain boundaries. And we prove through our work that this isn't about favoritism or scandal. It's about two people who connected and refused to let fear make their decisions. You could lose everything. I could. But I could also gain something I didn't think was possible anymore. That's worth the risk. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Probably both. She laughed, the sound breaking through her tension. What are we going to do? We're going to be exactly what we said we'd be. Professional at work, private outside of it. And we're going to trust that the truth is enough. And if it's not? Daniel moved close enough to touch her face, the gesture tender despite the professional setting. Then we'll deal with that when it comes. Together. Evelyn leaned into his touch for just a moment, then stepped back, rebuilding her armor. You should go. We can't afford any more ammunition against us. I know. Daniel headed for the door, then paused. Evelyn, I don't regret this. Any of it. Whatever happens next. Neither do I, she said softly. That's what scares me most. Daniel left her office and went back to his own, where he found an email from Stephen Chang welcoming him to the corporate department and outlining his new responsibilities. The work looked dry and technical, miles away from the courtroom drama he'd been thriving in. But Daniel had meant what he said to Evelyn. He'd find a way to excel, to prove himself, to show that he could handle whatever they threw at him. That night, he picked Emma up early and took her to the Science Museum as promised, letting her excitement about dinosaurs wash away some of the day's tension. They walked through the exhibits hand in hand, and Emma chattered about fossils and extinction events, and Daniel felt his world rebalance slightly. Daddy, did you have a good day at work? Emma asked as they looked at a massive T-Rex skeleton. It was challenging, but I think I did okay. Mrs. Chen says you're working on something really important. Is that true? I was. Now I'm working on something different, but it's still important. Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness. As long as you're helping people, it's important. That's what Mommy used to say. Daniel's throat tightened. Your mom was very smart. I know. I wish she could see the dinosaurs with us. She would have loved this. She loved spending time with you. They stood together in the museum's dim lighting, surrounded by ancient bones, and Daniel felt the past and present colliding. Sarah would have known what to do about Evelyn, about the accusations, about balancing love and career. She'd always had clarity where he had doubt. But Sarah was gone, and Daniel had to make these choices alone. He just hoped he was making them for the right reasons. That night, after Emma was asleep, his phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. Are you okay? Managing. You? Angry. At them for weaponizing this. At myself for not being more careful. We were careful. Someone was just more determined. What happens now? Daniel thought about that question, about all its implications. Now we prove them wrong. We show that merit matters more than gossip, and we keep being who we are because that's the only way forward. I wish I had your certainty. It's not certainty, it's stubbornness. But sometimes that's enough. He could almost hear her laugh. Good night, Daniel. Thank you for today, for not falling apart. Good night, Evelyn. We'll get through this. He set down his phone and stared at the ceiling, knowing sleep would be a long time coming. The battle lines were drawn now, the accusations made public within the firm. Everything he did from here on would be scrutinized, judged, weaponized if possible. But Daniel Moore had been counted out before, when his wife died. When he was a single father trying to finish law school, when people said he'd never make it in a top firm, he'd proven them wrong every time through sheer determination and refusal to quit. This would be no different. He'd excel in corporate law, he'd document every achievement, and he'd prove that what he and Evelyn had wasn't scandal, but something rare and worth protecting. The cost might be brutal, the fight might break him, but walking away had never been Daniel's style, and he wasn't about to start now. Outside his window, Chicago glittered in the darkness, indifferent to his struggles, full of people fighting their own battles. Daniel closed his eyes and let exhaustion finally take him, knowing that tomorrow the war would continue, and he needed to be ready. The corporate department occupied the 28th floor, and from the moment Daniel walked through its doors Tuesday morning, he felt the difference. Where litigation had been controlled chaos, urgent motions, depositions, courtroom drama, corporate law was methodical and precise. Contracts stretched hundreds of pages, merger agreements required microscopic attention to detail, and the work moved at a glacial pace that made Daniel's teeth ache with impatience. Stephen Chang greeted him with a firm handshake and an assessing look. He was in his early 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of calm demeanor that suggested very little rattled him. I heard about your work on Hartwell, Stephen said as he led Daniel to a small office, noticeably smaller than his litigation space. Impressive analysis for a junior associate, Though I'll warn you, corporate work requires different skills. Less flash, more endurance. I'm ready to learn whatever you need to teach me. Good attitude. You'll need it. Stephen dropped a stack of documents on Daniel's desk that had to be 3 inches thick. Merger agreement for a tech acquisition. I need you to review every clause for potential liability issues. Flag anything that could expose our client to risk. Daniel looked at the mountain of paper and suppressed a sigh. Timeline? End of week, and yes, I know that's aggressive. Welcome to corporate. The work was mind-numbing in a way litigation never had been. Daniel read through page after page of dense legal language, tracking definitions, cross-referencing exhibits, his eyes glazing over by lunchtime. But he forced himself to stay focused, to bring the same meticulous attention he'd applied to the Hartwell case. If this was another test, and he suspected it was, he'd pass it through sheer determination. At 2 p.m, his desk phone rang, an internal extension he didn't recognize. Daniel Moore. Mr. Moore. This is Susan Garrett from the Ethics Committee. We'd like to schedule an interview with you regarding the matter under review. Would Thursday at 10 work for your schedule? His stomach dropped. The formal review was moving forward. Yes, that works. Excellent. Conference room D on the 42nd floor. Please bring any documentation of your work assignments and interactions with Ms. Hart since your hiring date. I will. Can I ask what specifically you'll be examining? We'll discuss that during the interview. Have a good day, Mr. Moore. The line went dead. Daniel sat staring at his phone, anxiety crawling up his spine. An ethics committee interview was serious. It meant they were building a formal record, gathering evidence, preparing for potential disciplinary action. Against him? Against Evelyn? Or both? He immediately started compiling documentation. Every email about case assignments, every timesheet, every piece of work product he'd generated. By the time 5 o'clock came, he had a comprehensive file that showed exactly what he'd done and when, with timestamps and witnesses to corroborate that nothing had been handed to him improperly. He was so focused on the documentation that he didn't notice someone standing in his doorway until she spoke. Burning the midnight oil already? Daniel looked up to find a woman about his age, dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, wearing a charcoal suit that screamed senior associate. She was smiling, but there was calculation in her eyes. Just getting organized, Daniel said carefully. Rebecca Torres. I'm one of the senior associates in corporate. Heard you transferred over from litigation. That's right, Daniel Moore. She stepped into his office, uninvited, and perched on the edge of his desk. Must be quite a change, from courtroom drama to contract review. It's definitely different. I also heard you're under investigation by the Ethics Committee. Something about an inappropriate relationship with Evelyn Hart? Her tone was conversational, but Daniel heard the probing beneath it. I'm not sure where you heard that, but I don't think it's appropriate for us to discuss. Rebecca's smile didn't waver. Oh, everyone's heard it. It's the worst-kept secret in the firm. The managing partner and the new junior associate makes for great gossip. Daniel felt anger rise but kept his voice level. Ms. Hart and I have maintained a strictly professional relationship. If people want to create drama where none exists, that's their choice. I'm here to work. Of course you are. Rebecca stood, smoothing her skirt. Word of advice, though? Corporate department is different from litigation. We value discretion, consistency, loyalty to the firm's reputation. People who create scandals don't last long here, regardless of how talented they might be. I'll keep that in mind. Was there anything else? Just welcoming you to the department. We're a tight-knit group. We take care of our own, but we also don't tolerate people who threaten our stability. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Daniel? That merger agreement Stephen gave you? Most senior associates need 2 weeks to do it properly. He's testing whether you'll rush it and make mistakes. Don't. She left before Daniel could respond. He stared after her, processing the interaction. It had been a warning disguised as friendly advice. Stay in line, don't make waves, prove you're worth the trouble you're causing. Daniel looked down at the merger agreement and made a decision. He'd take as much time as he needed to do it right, even if it meant working nights and weekends. Rebecca had inadvertently given him valuable information, and he'd use it. That evening, after picking up Emma and getting her fed and bathed and tucked into bed, Daniel returned to his desk at home and dove back into the merger agreement. He worked until 2 in the morning, making notes on potential liability issues, researching precedents, building a comprehensive analysis that went beyond what Stephen had asked for. Wednesday passed in a blur of contract clauses and legal research. Thursday morning arrived too quickly, and Daniel found himself back on the 42nd floor, standing outside Conference Room D with his documentation file, trying to calm his racing heart. Susan Garrett turned out to be a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that gave away nothing. She sat across from Daniel with 2 other committee members, a male partner Daniel didn't recognize, and Patricia Chen from HR. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Moore," Susan began. "This is a preliminary interview to gather facts about your relationship with Ms. Hart and whether any conflicts of interest exist. Everything you say here is confidential and will be used solely for the committee's evaluation. Do you understand?" "I do." "Good. Let's start with how you met Ms. Hart." Daniel took a breath and told the story. The dog running into traffic, the rescue, the phone call. He kept it factual and straightforward, watching their faces for reactions. "And she invited you to dinner as a thank you?" the male partner asked. "Yes. I initially declined, but she insisted." "This was before you started working here?" "The rescue was the night before my first day. The dinner was that same evening." Patricia made a note. "And you didn't know she worked here? Didn't know she was the managing partner?" "I had no idea. When she introduced herself, she just said her name. I didn't make the connection until the next morning when Patricia here brought me up to meet her." "That must have been quite a shock," Susan said. "It was. We both agreed immediately that we needed to maintain professional boundaries going forward." "But you continued to see each other outside of work," the male partner said. "It wasn't a question. We encountered each other a few times at the riverfront. I walk there on weekends with my daughter. Ms. Hart walks her dog in the same area. Chicago's a big city, but certain neighborhoods overlap." "And these encounters were purely coincidental?" Susan's tone suggested skepticism. Daniel met her gaze directly. "The first few were. After that, we were both aware we might run into each other. We made no effort to avoid it." "Why not? Given your respective positions, wouldn't avoidance have been the prudent choice?" This was the heart of it, Daniel realized. They wanted to know whether he and Evelyn had been reckless, whether they'd put personal desires ahead of professional judgment. In retrospect, yes, avoidance might have been prudent, Daniel said carefully. But at the time, it felt unnecessarily extreme. We were friendly acquaintances who occasionally crossed paths in a public setting. Neither of us saw that as inherently problematic. "But it evolved beyond friendly acquaintance, didn't it?" Patricia asked. "You've been to Ms. Hart's residence multiple times, according to reports." "Twice. Once to return her wallet that she'd left at a coffee shop. Once when she invited me to discuss career mentorship." "Career mentorship," the male partner repeated. "From your boss, doesn't that seem like a conflict?" "She's not my direct supervisor. She's the managing partner of the entire firm. I work for John Reeves in litigation." "Worked for him," Daniel corrected. "My assignments came from John, not from Ms. Hart. She had no direct involvement in my work." Susan leaned forward. "Mr. Moore, I'm going to ask you directly. Are you romantically involved with Evelyn Hart?" The question hung in the air. Daniel knew that lying to the ethics committee could end his career immediately, but telling the complete truth could destroy both him and Evelyn. He chose his words with extreme care. "Ms. Hart and I have developed a personal friendship that includes mutual respect and affection. Whether that constitutes romantic involvement is a matter of interpretation. What I can tell you unequivocally is that our friendship has had zero impact on my professional performance or opportunities. Every assignment I've received has been based on my work product. Every achievement has been my own." "That's a very careful answer," Susan observed. "It's an honest one. You asked me to be truthful, and I am. My relationship with Ms. Hart is personal and private, but it has not compromised my professional integrity or created any actual conflict of interest." The committee members exchanged glances. Patricia spoke next. "What about your assignment to the Hartwell case? That's one of the firm's biggest litigations. For a brand new junior associate to be placed on it seems unusual. John Reeves made that assignment based on my document review work. He needed someone detail-oriented who could spot patterns in large data sets. I delivered what he needed, and he expanded my role accordingly. Ms. Hart had no involvement in that decision. We've spoken to Mr. Reeves, the male partner said. He confirms your account. He also said your work was exceptional, some of the best analysis he's seen from a junior associate. Do you think that's accurate? It was a trap question. Agree, and he looked arrogant. Disagree, and he undermined his own competence. I think I worked extremely hard and brought skills from my previous experience that proved valuable. Whether it was exceptional is for others to judge. What I know is that I earned every opportunity through effort and results. Susan made a note, then looked up. Mr. Moore, you understand that the appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as actual impropriety? That even if you've done nothing technically wrong, the perception that Miss Hart has shown you favoritism undermines confidence in the firm's meritocracy? I understand that, which is why I've documented every aspect of my work and can demonstrate clearly that I've received no preferential treatment. I have the documentation here if you'd like to review it. Daniel slid his file across the table. Susan opened it, flipping through emails, timesheets, work product. The other committee members leaned in to look. After several minutes of review, Susan closed the file. This is thorough. We'll need to keep this for our records. Of course. One final question, the male partner said. If we determine that your friendship with Ms. Hart creates an untenable appearance of impropriety, would you be willing to resign from the firm to resolve the issue? The question hit like a physical blow. Daniel took a moment to compose himself. I would be disappointed because I believe I've earned my place here through merit, but I understand that perception matters in a professional environment. If the committee determines that my continued employment creates problems that can't be resolved another way, I would accept that decision. It was the right answer, respectful, acknowledging their authority while defending his position, but saying it felt like swallowing glass. Thank you for your time, Mr. Moore, Susan said. We'll complete our investigation and provide our findings to the senior partnership within 2 weeks. You'll be notified of the outcome. Daniel stood on shaking legs and left the conference room. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall for a moment, trying to steady himself. 2 weeks. 14 days of uncertainty while they decided his future. His phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. How did it go? He shouldn't respond while still in the building, but he needed the connection. Survived, told the truth. Now we wait. I'm sorry you're going through this. We're going through it. Together, remember? Together. Though I'd understand if you wanted to walk away. Daniel looked at those words and felt anger surge. Don't give me an out. We decided to fight. I'm not backing down now. The response took longer this time. Okay, then we fight. Daniel pocketed his phone and headed back to the corporate department where the merger agreement waited. If this was going to be his last 2 weeks at Morrison & Hart, he'd make damn sure they were 2 weeks of exceptional work that no one could question. He worked like a man possessed for the next 10 days. The merger agreement was completed in 12 days instead of Stephen's 1-week deadline, but the analysis Daniel produced was comprehensive enough that Stephen actually smiled when he reviewed it. This is partner-level work, Stephen said. You caught liability issues our senior associates missed on the first draft. Where'd you learn corporate structuring? Night school and necessity. I worked as a paralegal before law school, mostly business litigation. Picked up corporate fundamentals by osmosis. Well, your osmosis is better than most people's formal training. Stephen dropped another file on Daniel's desk. IP licensing agreement. Client's a software company acquiring a smaller competitor. I need you to identify any intellectual property conflicts or licensing issues that could blow up post-acquisition. It was more complex than the merger agreement, and Daniel dove into it with the same meticulous focus. He worked through lunches, stayed late after picking up Emma, reviewed materials on weekends while his daughter played at the park. Mrs. Chen commented that he looked exhausted, and Emma started asking if he was okay with increasing frequency. I'm fine, sweetheart, he assured her, though he could see the worry in her 7-year-old eyes. Just working hard to do a good job. You always work hard. Maybe too hard. She sounded so much like Sarah in that moment that Daniel's throat tightened. You're probably right. Tell you what, when I finish this project, let's take a whole day off. Just you and me, anywhere you want to go. Really? Even if it's a school day? Even if it's a school day. We'll call it a mental health day." Emma's face lit up with a smile that made every exhausted hour worth it. The review period was almost over when Daniel got called back to the 42nd floor. This time it was just Susan Garrett and Richard Blackwood waiting in the conference room, and Daniel's stomach clenched with anxiety. "Sit down, Mr. Moore," Blackwood said, his tone impossible to read. Daniel sat, forcing his hands to remain steady on the table. "We've completed our investigation," Susan began. "We've reviewed your documentation, interviewed multiple people, and examined your work product in detail. We've also interviewed Ms. Hart separately." Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. This was it, the moment that would determine whether he still had a career. "Our findings are as follows," Susan continued. "We found no evidence of preferential treatment in work assignments or professional opportunities. Your placement on the Hartwell case was justified by your document analysis skills and was decided by John Reeves without Ms. Hart's involvement. Your subsequent work has been consistently high quality and appropriate for your experience level." Daniel felt a flicker of hope but didn't let it show. "However," Blackwood said, and Daniel's hope dimmed, "we did find that your personal relationship with Ms. Hart, while not rising to the level of misconduct, creates an appearance of impropriety that is damaging to firm morale and confidence in our meritocratic processes. Therefore," Susan said, "we are implementing the following conditions for your continued employment. First, you will remain in the corporate department for a minimum of 1 year, with no contact with litigation matters or personnel. Second, Ms. Hart will have no involvement in any decisions affecting your compensation, assignments, or advancement. Third, you and Ms. Hart will maintain strictly professional contact within firm premises, with no private meetings unless a third party is present. And fourth," Blackwood added, his gaze hard, "you will both sign agreements acknowledging that any future violations of these conditions will result in immediate termination for you and disciplinary action for Ms. Hart. Are these terms acceptable?" Daniel processed quickly. It wasn't termination. It wasn't the end. It was survival with conditions. "Yes," he said, "those terms are acceptable." "Good. The agreements will be prepared by end of day. Sign them and return them to HR by Monday." Blackwood stood. "Mr. Moore, you've shown impressive work ethic and ability during this process. Don't waste this second chance." "I won't, sir. Thank you." Daniel left the conference room feeling like he'd just survived a near-death experience. Relief and residual fear warred in his chest as he rode the elevator back down to corporate. He wanted to text Evelyn immediately, but knew he had to wait until he was outside the building, outside the surveillance that had already documented too much. At lunch, he walked 3 blocks to a small park and called her from a bench where no one from the firm would see him. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel?" "It's over. We survived." He heard her exhale shakily. "What were the conditions?" He told her everything: the department restriction, the separation of her from his career decisions, the no private meeting rule, the termination agreement. When he finished, Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "A year in corporate. That's going to be hard for you." "I'll manage. At least I'm still employed. And we can't meet privately at work anymore. No closed-door conversations, no elevator talks, nothing without witnesses." "I know." "Daniel, this is going to make everything harder. Our relationship, our ability to even have a relationship, we'll figure it out," Daniel said firmly. "We knew this wouldn't be easy. We prepared for consequences. Now we deal with them and move forward." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's doable. 1 year in corporate, proving myself without any shadow of your involvement. Then we reevaluate. In the meantime, we have weekends, we have evenings, we have lives outside this firm. Lives that someone was watching closely enough to document. We have to assume they're still watching." Daniel had thought about that. "Then we give them nothing to see. We're careful, we're discreet, and we wait out this year. I can be patient when I need to be." "Can you?" "Because I'm not sure I can." There was frustration in her voice, and underneath it, fear. Daniel understood. This was her firm, her reputation, her legacy being threatened. "Evelyn, look at what we just survived. An ethics investigation that could have ended both our careers. We came through it because our story held up under scrutiny. That matters." We came through it with restrictions that basically wall us off from each other professionally. Professionally, yes, but not personally. They can't control what we do outside of work. Can't they? Someone already hired a PI to watch my house. Who's to say they won't do it again? Daniel took a breath, choosing his next words carefully. Then we're careful. We meet in different places. We vary our patterns. We don't give them ammunition, but we don't stop living either, because that's letting fear win. Evelyn was quiet again. When she spoke, her voice was softer. I've been managing this firm for 3 years, Daniel. Making hard decisions, sacrificing personal comfort for professional success. And then you walked into my life, literally ran into traffic to save my dog, and suddenly I'm questioning all of those sacrifices. Maybe that's not a bad thing. It's terrifying. I know. But you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You built this career through determination and brilliance. Don't doubt yourself now. He heard her laugh quietly. You're supposed to be the one falling apart. You're the one who almost lost his job. Almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. I'm still here, still fighting, and I'm not going anywhere. Even with a year in corporate purgatory ahead of you? Even then, Stephen Chang says I'm doing partner-level work. I'll use this year to prove I can excel in multiple departments. That makes me more valuable, not less. Always finding the silver lining. Someone has to. You're too busy catastrophizing. That got a genuine laugh. Fair point. All right, Mr. Optimist. What's our next move? We sign the agreements, we follow the rules, and this weekend we take Emma and Bailey to the park like we've been doing, because that's not a violation of any corporate policy. You're sure about that? They might try to argue. Let them try. What we do on our personal time in public spaces with my daughter present is nobody's business but ours. Unless they want to argue that employees can never socialize outside of work, they don't have a leg to stand on. You've really thought this through. I've thought about nothing else for 2 weeks. This is survivable, Evelyn. Difficult, but survivable. The question is whether you're willing to keep fighting. You know I am. Then we're on the same page. Sign the agreements, serve the time, prove ourselves, and come out stronger on the other side. They talked for a few more minutes, making plans for Saturday, discussing logistics and caution in equal measure. When Daniel finally hung up and headed back to the office, he felt centered again, focused on the path forward instead of the obstacles behind. Stephen was waiting at his desk when he returned, holding the IP licensing agreement Daniel had submitted that morning. This is exceptional work, Stephen said without preamble. You found 3 potential patent conflicts that could have cost our client millions in litigation. Where the hell did you learn IP law? Self-taught, mostly. I worked on a few cases at my old firm that involved patent disputes. Learned to read technical specifications and spot overlap. Stephen studied him with new respect. You're wasted in junior associate work. This is senior associate level analysis, maybe higher. I'm recommending you for early advancement review. Daniel blinked in surprise. I've only been here 3 months. And you've produced work that some of our third years can't match. The usual timeline is 2 years to senior associate, but exceptional performance can accelerate that. I'll talk to the partnership committee. I appreciate that. Though given the recent investigation, the investigation concluded you did nothing wrong, Stephen interrupted. As far as I'm concerned, that closes the matter. Your work speaks for itself, and I don't let politics interfere with recognizing talent. After Stephen left, Daniel sat at his desk feeling like the ground had shifted again, this time in his favor. An advancement recommendation from Stephen Chang carried weight. The man was notoriously difficult to impress and famously apolitical. If the partnership took his recommendation seriously, Daniel could be looking at senior associate within a year, completely independent of anything involving Evelyn. That night, he told Emma about the good news over dinner. Does that mean you get a raise? She asked, ever practical. Eventually, yes, and it means Daddy's doing well at his job. I knew you would. You always work really hard. Emma paused, then said, Are you still in trouble? Like you were before? Daniel's chest tightened. He tried to shield her from the stress, but 7-year-olds were perceptive. I was never really in trouble, sweetheart. Just some people at work asking questions about whether I was doing my job right. And I showed them I was, so everything's okay now. Good, because Mrs. Chen said you looked worried, and I don't like it when you're worried. I'm not worried anymore, I promise. That weekend, they met Evelyn and Bailey at a different park, farther north, varying their pattern as they'd discussed. Emma ran ahead with Bailey, and Evelyn and Daniel walked at a distance that allowed for private conversation but wouldn't look intimate to any observer. Stephen recommended me for early advancement, Daniel said quietly. Evelyn's head snapped toward him. Seriously? Completely on his own initiative, based solely on my work in corporate. That's incredible. Daniel, if the partnership approves that, it completely neutralizes any favoritism accusations. You'll have advanced on merit under a different supervisor's recommendation. That's what I thought. 1 year of keeping my head down and producing excellent work, and I come out of this with my reputation intact and a promotion to show for it. Evelyn smiled, genuine and warm. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm stubborn. There's a difference. No, you're remarkable. Most people would have crumbled under this pressure. You're thriving. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching Emma teach Bailey to fetch sticks. The spring afternoon was warm, the park full of families and couples, normal life happening all around them. I miss you, Evelyn said quietly. The closed-door conversations, the ability to just talk without worrying about who's watching. I know, I miss it too. But we have this. Saturday mornings, phone calls, stolen moments. It's not ideal, but it's enough for now. Is it? Enough? Daniel looked at her, seeing the doubt and longing mixed together in her expression. It has to be, because the alternative is walking away, and I'm not doing that. Are you? No. But sometimes I wonder if we're being selfish. If this is fair to you, to Emma, to your career. Stop. Daniel's voice was firm but gentle. You don't get to make that decision for me. I chose this, eyes wide open, knowing the risks, and I'd choose it again. Why? Because you're worth it. Because what we have is real. And because I spent 3 years just surviving after Sarah died, and you're the first person who's made me feel like living again. I'm not giving that up without a fight. Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she blinked rapidly, maintaining control. Emma's watching. Then let's give her something good to see. Daniel called out, Hey, Emma, want to get ice cream? His daughter came running, Bailey loping beside her, both of them grinning. Yes, can Miss Hart and Bailey come too? If they want to. We'd love to, Evelyn said, and the smile she gave Emma was unguarded and genuine. They walked to an ice cream shop near the park, Emma chattering the entire way about school and her friends and the book she was reading. Evelyn listened with the same focused attention she gave everything, asking questions, laughing at Emma's stories, completely present in a way that Daniel found incredibly attractive. This was what normal looked like, he thought. This was what they could have if they could just survive the scrutiny and the politics and the people determined to tear them apart. A family, unconventional and complicated, but real. Later that night, after Emma was asleep and Daniel was reviewing contracts for Monday, his phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. Today was perfect. Thank you for not giving up on us. He typed back, Thank you for being worth not giving up on. 1 year in corporate. Then what? Then we reevaluate. See where we stand professionally and personally. Make decisions based on reality instead of fear. That sounds almost optimistic. I learned from the best catastrophizer in Chicago. Balance is important. He could almost hear her laugh. Get some sleep, Daniel. Tomorrow starts another week of proving ourselves. Together, he typed back. Together, she confirmed. Daniel set down his phone and looked out his window at the city lights, thinking about the year ahead. 12 months of corporate law, of proving himself independently, of careful weekends and stolen phone calls. It would be hard, would test both of them in ways they probably couldn't fully anticipate, but they'd survive the investigation. They'd survive the accusations and the scrutiny and the threat of termination. They could survive this too. And maybe, just maybe, they'd come out the other side with something strong enough to build a real future on. A home where Emma could grow up with stability, where Evelyn could be more than just her career, where Daniel could be both a good father and a man who loved fiercely. It was a fragile hope, vulnerable to a dozen different threats. But it was hope nonetheless, and Daniel Moore had learned long ago that hope was worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed impossible. Especially then. The year that followed tested Daniel in ways he hadn't anticipated. Corporate law turned out to be less about flash and drama and more about endurance and precision, qualities he'd developed through necessity but had never fully appreciated until now. He worked on mergers that took months to close, licensing agreements that required reading thousands of pages of technical specifications, corporate restructurings that demanded understanding tax law, securities regulations, and international trade restrictions simultaneously. Stephen Chang proved to be an exacting but fair mentor, pushing Daniel harder than John Reeves ever had, but in different ways. Where John had tested his ability to think quickly under pressure, Stephen tested his capacity for sustained focus and meticulous attention to detail. By the 6-month mark, Daniel was handling matters that typically went to third-year associates, and by month 9, Stephen was letting him take the lead on client calls. "You have a gift for making complex issues comprehensible," Stephen told him one afternoon in late November. "Clients trust you because you don't condescend. You explain things clearly without making them feel stupid." "I learned that raising a 7-year-old," Daniel said, "Emma asks 1,000 questions, and if I can't explain something so she understands it, that's my failure, not hers." Stephen smiled at that. "Well, whatever the source, it's serving you well. I'm moving forward with the advancement recommendation. You'll be reviewed for senior associate in January." The news should have felt triumphant, but Daniel found himself thinking about the cost. Emma had started therapy 2 months ago. Nothing dramatic, just a counselor to help her process the long hours Daniel worked, the stress he couldn't quite hide, the fact that her father was dating someone she liked but rarely got to see. The therapist said Emma was resilient and well-adjusted, but Daniel heard the subtext. She was coping, not thriving, and the distinction mattered. He'd cut back where he could, made it to every school event, prioritized their weekend time together. But the 60-hour work weeks were taking their toll on both of them. Emma had stopped asking when they could see Ms. Hart and Bailey, and that silence worried Daniel more than questions would have. His relationship with Evelyn had evolved into something that existed primarily in the spaces between things. Saturday mornings at various parks around the city, carefully avoiding patterns that might be tracked. Phone calls late at night after Emma was asleep, when they could talk without worrying about witnesses. Occasional dinners at restaurants far from downtown, where they were unlikely to encounter anyone from the firm. It was sustaining but not satisfying, connection without intimacy, love expressed through restraint. "I feel like we're having an affair," Evelyn said one December evening over dinner at a small Italian place in Pilsen. "Sneaking around, watching for observers, measuring every gesture. Except we're not actually doing anything wrong. We're being careful. That's different than sneaking." "Is it?" "Because it feels the same. Guilt without the fun of actual transgression." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture that felt simultaneously natural and dangerous. 3 more months. Then I'm a senior associate in corporate, completely independent of any litigation connection to you. The advancement will prove I earned my place on merit. After that, the restrictions ease." "Will they? Or will there always be something, another reason to be careful, another perception to manage, another sacrifice required?" There was weariness in her voice that Daniel hadn't heard before. 9 months of constraints had worn on both of them, but Evelyn carried the additional weight of leadership. Every decision she made was scrutinized for favoritism, every interaction with Daniel noted and evaluated. She'd become even more isolated than before, maintaining distance from him at work so complete that they rarely even made eye contact in the hallways. "What are you saying?" Daniel asked quietly. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands. "I'm saying I don't know how much longer I can do this. The hiding, the restraint, the constant vigilance. I'm tired, Daniel, and I'm starting to wonder if we're fighting for something that can never actually work." Fear lanced through Daniel's chest. "You're thinking about ending this." "I'm thinking about reality. You have Emma to consider, a career that's finally taking off. Do you really want to tie yourself to someone whose position will always complicate your life? Who can never fully be part of your world without creating problems? You are part of my world. You have been since the night I saved Bailey." "As what? A woman you see on weekends and call late at night? That's not a relationship, Daniel. That's a holding pattern. Daniel took a breath, forcing himself to stay calm, even as panic clawed at him. What do you want? Tell me what would make this work for you. Evelyn pulled her hand back, and the loss of contact felt like a physical wound. I want normalcy. I want to be able to see you without calculating risk. I want to meet Emma for dinner without worrying that someone's documenting it. I want to wake up next to you instead of saying goodnight over the phone and going home to an empty house with just my dog for company. Then let's do that. We can't. The restrictions are about work contact, not our personal lives. What we do outside the office is our business. You know it's more complicated than that. Only because we're letting it be. Daniel leaned forward, intensity replacing his initial fear. Evelyn, we've spent 9 months proving we can maintain professional boundaries. We've survived an ethics investigation, career threats, constant scrutiny. We've done everything they asked. At some point, we have to stop living in fear of what people might think and start living our actual lives. And if that damages your career, if being openly involved with me costs you opportunities, then that's the cost and I'll pay it. But I'm not going to preemptively sacrifice what we have because of what might happen. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, and Daniel saw the war happening behind her eyes. Hope battling caution, desire fighting duty. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's a choice. And I'm choosing you, choosing us, choosing to build something real instead of just surviving in the margins. Even if it means people at the firm will always question whether you earned your position. Stephen's recommendation proves I did. So does every client who's trusted me with their matters. So does every complex deal I've closed in the past 9 months. My work speaks for itself. Anyone who wants to question it after all that is looking for reasons to doubt, and I can't control that. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I don't deserve you. That's not for you to decide. I'm the one who gets to decide what I deserve, and I choose this. I choose you. The conversation shifted after that, moving from doubt to possibility, from fear to cautious planning. They talked about what normalcy could look like. Daniel and Emma having dinner at Evelyn's house, family weekends that didn't require surveillance awareness, eventually maybe even living together if Emma was comfortable with it. It felt like permission to want things they'd been denying themselves, to imagine a future that wasn't defined by restrictions. When Daniel got home that night, Emma was still awake, reading in bed. He sat on the edge of her mattress, and she put down her book to look at him. You look happy, she observed. Happier than you've been in a while. I am happy. Can I talk to you about something important? Emma sat up straighter, suddenly serious. Is something wrong? No, actually something might be very right, but I need to know how you'd feel about it. Daniel took a breath. You know Ms. Hart and I are friends. We've been spending time together on weekends when we see her and Bailey. I know, I like Ms. Hart. She's nice to me and she doesn't treat me like a little kid. Good, because I like her too. A lot. And I'm thinking about spending more time with her, maybe having her over for dinner here sometimes, or going to her house. How would you feel about that? Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. Would she be like your girlfriend? Something like that, yes. Would that mean Bailey would come over too? Despite the tension, Daniel smiled. Probably, yes. Then I think it's a good idea. You're always happier when we see her, and I like Bailey a lot. Emma paused, then said quietly, Would Ms. Hart be like a new mom? Daniel's throat tightened. This was the question he'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. No one will ever replace your mom, Emma. Your mom loved you so much, and she'll always be your mom. But Ms. Hart cares about you, and if things work out between us, she could be someone else important in your life. Someone who's there for you, who cares about you. Is that okay? Emma was quiet for a long moment, her small face thoughtful. I think Mommy would want you to be happy, and I think she'd like Ms. Hart because Ms. Hart is kind and smart, and she makes you smile. The wisdom in those words, coming from a 7-year-old who'd lost her mother too young, made Daniel pull Emma into a tight hug. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't always notice. That got a laugh, breaking the emotional tension. You're absolutely right. I should pay better attention. So can we have Ms. Hart and Bailey over for dinner this weekend? I'll ask her. But Emma, This is new for all of us. It might be awkward sometimes or complicated. If you ever feel uncomfortable or want to talk about it, you tell me, okay? Okay, Daddy, I promise. The dinner happened that Saturday, and it was both easier and harder than Daniel had anticipated. Evelyn arrived at 6 with Bailey and a bottle of wine, looking nervous in a way he'd never seen her. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement, mostly about Bailey, but also clearly pleased to have Ms. Hart in their home. Daniel made pasta, one of the few dishes he could reliably cook well, while Emma showed Evelyn her room and her favorite books and the drawing she'd made at school that week. From the kitchen, he could hear Emma's chatter and Evelyn's responses, patient and engaged, and something in his chest loosened. Over dinner, they talked about school and work and books and movies, normal conversation that felt almost surreal in its ordinariness. Emma dominated much of the discussion, telling stories with the unselfconscious enthusiasm of childhood, and Evelyn listened like Emma was the most interesting person in the world. After dinner, Emma fell asleep on the couch between Daniel and Evelyn. Bailey curled up on the floor beside her. Daniel carefully carried his daughter to bed while Evelyn cleaned up the kitchen despite his protests. "You don't have to do that," he said when he returned to find her loading the dishwasher. "I know. I wanted to." She straightened, wiping her hands on a towel. "Emma's wonderful. You've done an incredible job with her." "She did most of the work herself. She's always been resilient." "She gets that from you." Evelyn moved closer, and for the first time in months they were alone together without the weight of workplace surveillance. This was nice, normal, like we talked about. It was, and it can be our new normal if you want it. Evelyn kissed him then, soft and full of promise, and Daniel felt the last of his defenses crumble. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn rested her forehead against his. "I want this," she whispered. "All of it. You, Emma, building something real. I'm terrified, but I want it. Then let's do it. Slowly, carefully, but actually do it instead of just talking about it." They established a rhythm after that. Evelyn came to dinner once a week, gradually becoming a familiar presence in Emma's life. Emma started calling her by her first name instead of Ms. Hart, a small shift that felt monumental. They went to museums together, took Bailey to the dog park, had lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and cartoons. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments and adjustment periods, but it was real in a way their previous careful distance hadn't been. At work, Daniel continued to excel. His advancement to senior associate was approved in January with unanimous partnership support. Stephen made a point of noting publicly that the promotion was based solely on Daniel's performance in corporate law, completely independent of his litigation work. It felt like vindication, proof that he'd earned his place through merit alone. The Hartwell case finally went to trial in February, and Daniel watched the results with interest, despite no longer being involved. John Reeves led the defense brilliantly, and the analysis Daniel had done on Dr. Henderson's communication patterns proved crucial. The jury found for their client, awarding minimal damages, and the firm celebrated what was being called one of the biggest defense victories in recent years. John sought Daniel out the day after the verdict. "Your pattern analysis won that case. The jury couldn't get past the inconsistency once we showed it to them." "I'm glad it helped." "It did more than help. It was the difference between a defense verdict and massive liability." John paused. "I put in a request to have you back in litigation. Your year in corporate is up. You've proven yourself in multiple departments, and frankly, we need your analytical skills. Stephen won't like losing you, but that's his problem." Daniel felt excitement war with uncertainty. What about the restrictions, the separation from anything involving Ms. Hart? "The restrictions were always about proving you could succeed independently. You've done that. As far as I'm concerned, the favoritism concerns are settled. You're a senior associate now, and you earned it. Where you work is based on where your skills are best used." The transfer back to litigation happened in March. Daniel found himself back in familiar territory, depositions and motions and courtroom strategy, but now with the added expertise from his year in corporate. He could spot contractual issues that pure litigators missed, could analyze business documents with a depth that made him invaluable on complex commercial cases. And through it all, his relationship with Evelyn deepened. They were no longer hiding, no longer measuring every interaction for appearances. They had dinner with Emma multiple times a week. Evelyn started keeping clothes at Daniel's apartment for mornings, when she stayed over after Emma was asleep. They talked about the future openly, whether they wanted to move in together, what that would mean for Emma, how to blend their very different lives into something cohesive. In June, nearly 18 months after Daniel had first walked into Morrison and Hart, the senior partners called an all-firm meeting. Daniel filed into the large conference room with everyone else, curious about the unusual summons. Evelyn stood at the front with the senior partnership, her expression composed but radiating satisfaction. "Thank you all for coming," Richard Blackwood began. "We have several announcements. First, Morrison and Hart is expanding. We're opening a second office in Milwaukee and significantly growing our corporate and litigation departments here in Chicago." There was murmuring through the crowd. Expansion meant opportunities for advancement, new positions, growth. "Second," Margaret Oak said, "we're promoting several attorneys to partner. The partnership committee has identified individuals who have shown exceptional skill, dedication, and judgment over the past year." She began reading names. Daniel heard Rebecca Torres called. The woman who'd warned him about causing trouble in corporate had apparently thrived in the department. Several senior associates he knew were named, and then Margaret said something that made Daniel's breath catch. And finally, in recognition of exceptional work bridging corporate and litigation expertise, we're offering early partnership to Daniel Moore. The room erupted in applause, and Daniel felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. Partnership. After 18 months, it was unprecedented, impossible, and apparently happening. John was grinning at him from across the room. Stephen was nodding with satisfaction. And Evelyn was looking at him with pride in something deeper, love, unguarded and unmistakable. After the meeting, after the congratulations and handshakes and backslapping, Daniel found himself in Evelyn's office. She closed the door, no longer forbidden now that he was a partner and peer, not a subordinate. "Did you know?" he asked. "I recused myself from the vote, but yes, I knew it was coming. Your work over the past year has been extraordinary. You've handled matters that senior partners struggled with. You've brought in new clients through your reputation. You earned this, Daniel. People will say you influenced it. Let them. Your record speaks for itself. No one can credibly argue favoritism when you've succeeded under multiple supervisors in different departments with unanimous partnership support." She moved closer. "You did this. Not because of me, not despite me. Because you're brilliant and determined and you refuse to let obstacles define you." Daniel pulled her into his arms, no longer worried about who might see or what they might think. "We did this. Together." "Together," Evelyn agreed. That evening, Daniel picked Emma up from school personally, something his new partnership flexibility would allow him to do more often. She climbed into the car, chattering about her day, and Daniel waited until they were home before telling her the news. "Remember how Daddy's been working really hard at his law firm?" "Uh-huh. You're always working hard." "Well, today they made me a partner. That means I'm one of the bosses now, and I'll make more money and have more control over my schedule." Emma's eyes went wide. "Does that mean you'll be home more?" "It does. I'll still work hard, but I'll have more flexibility. More time for us." Emma launched herself at him in a hug that nearly knocked him over. "That's the best news ever. Can we call Evelyn and tell her?" The easy use of Evelyn's name, the inclusion of her in their celebration, made Daniel's throat tight. "She already knows, sweetheart, but we're having dinner with her tonight to celebrate. How do you feel about going somewhere fancy?" "Can I wear my princess dress?" "Absolutely." They went to a steakhouse downtown, the same one where Evelyn had taken Daniel for their first dinner almost 2 years ago. Emma wore her princess dress, and Evelyn wore an elegant navy dress, and Daniel felt like he was living in a reality he'd stopped believing was possible. Over dinner, Evelyn pulled out a small wrapped box and handed it to Emma. "This is for you. A congratulations gift for being such a wonderful support to your dad." Emma opened it carefully to find a silver bracelet with a small dog charm. "It's Bailey." "It is. I thought you might like to carry a reminder of her with you." Emma put it on immediately, holding up her wrist to admire it. "I love it. Thank you, Evelyn." After dinner, they walked along the river, the same path where Daniel had saved Bailey. where this whole unlikely story had begun. Emma ran ahead, her princess dress flowing behind her, while Daniel and Evelyn walked hand in hand. "I've been thinking," Evelyn said quietly, "about what comes next." "And what did you conclude?" "That I want more of this. More dinners, more walks, more mornings waking up together. I want to build something with you and Emma that's permanent, not just dating with occasional sleepovers." Daniel's heart rate picked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying my townhouse is too big for one person and a dog, and your apartment is too small for two adults and a child. I'm saying maybe we should find somewhere that's ours, all of ours." It was a proposal of sorts, an invitation to merge their lives completely. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "That's a big step." "I know. And if it's too fast, if Emma's not ready, Emma asked me last week when you were moving in. She's been ready." Evelyn's eyes went wide. "She did?" "She did. She likes having you around. She likes the stability, the feeling of family, and so do I." "So is that a yes?" Daniel kissed her, right there on the riverfront where strangers passed and the city hummed around them, no longer caring who saw or what they thought. When he pulled back, Evelyn was smiling. "That's a yes." They told Emma that night, back at the apartment. She responded with a level of excitement that involved jumping on the couch and insisting Bailey needed to hear the news immediately via phone call. Her only request was that her room in the new place be big enough for sleepovers with friends, and that Bailey be allowed to sleep at the foot of her bed sometimes. The next few months blurred together in the best possible way. They found a house in Lincoln Park, not as expensive as Evelyn's townhouse, but spacious enough for all of them with a yard for Bailey. Emma got her big bedroom and helped pick out paint colors. Daniel and Evelyn merged their lives with surprising ease, their different routines and habits blending into something that worked because they both wanted it to. At work, Daniel thrived as a partner. He built a reputation for handling complex matters that required both corporate expertise and litigation skills. He mentored junior associates, remembering what it felt like to be the new person fighting for credibility. And he and Evelyn maintained professional boundaries at the office while building a rich personal life outside it, proving it was possible to have both. The firm gossip died down eventually, replaced by new scandals and dramas. Some people still whispered about favoritism, but Daniel's record spoke louder than rumors. He'd earned partnership through documented excellence, proven himself across multiple departments, built a client base that wanted him specifically. The story of his rise became less about Evelyn and more about his own capabilities. One Saturday morning in October, almost 2 years after that cold February night when Daniel had saved Bailey from traffic, he woke to find Evelyn already up, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and her laptop. Emma was still asleep, and Bailey was sprawled across the living room floor in a patch of sunlight. "Working on a weekend?" Daniel asked, pouring himself coffee. "Reviewing a brief, but I'm almost done." Evelyn closed her laptop and looked at him. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been? If Bailey hadn't gotten out that night, if you hadn't been walking by the river, if we'd made different choices when things got difficult?" "Sometimes. But mostly I'm just grateful things worked out the way they did. Even with all the complications, the investigation, the restrictions, the scrutiny, especially because of those things. They proved what we have is real, that we were willing to fight for it even when it would have been easier to walk away." Evelyn stood and moved to where he was leaning against the counter, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I love you. I don't say that enough." "You show it every day. That's better than words." "I still should say it. I love you, Daniel Moore. I love the father you are, the partner you've become, the man who didn't hesitate to save my dog even when it put him at risk. I love that you're stubborn and optimistic, and you refuse to let fear make your decisions. I love you too, and I love that you're fierce and brilliant and you learn to trust again, even though it terrified you." They kissed in the morning sunlight, and Daniel felt the absolute certainty that this was where he was meant to be. Not just geographically, but in life. With this woman, in this home, building this family. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Are you being mushy again?" "Maybe a little some," Daniel admitted. "Okay. Can we have pancakes?" "Absolutely. Want to help me make them?" As Emma climbed onto a stool to help mix batter and Evelyn poured orange juice and Bailey patted over hoping for dropped food, Daniel felt something settle in his chest. This was home. This was family. Not the family he'd planned for when Sarah was alive, but the family he'd built from loss and chance encounters and choosing courage over fear. Later that day, they went to the riverfront, their traditional Saturday activity, though now it felt like a celebration rather than a secret. They walked the same path where everything had started, Emma running ahead with Bailey, Daniel and Evelyn following hand in hand. "Thank you," Evelyn said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up. On us, on the possibility of this. I would have talked myself out of it 100 times if you hadn't been so stubbornly optimistic." "Someone had to be. You were busy catastrophizing." She laughed and leaned into him as they walked. "I still can't believe we made it, that we're actually here, living together, building a life. It seemed impossible for so long." "Nothing's impossible if you're willing to work for it. We just had to be willing to fight through the hard parts." Emma came running back, breathless and grinning. "Daddy, Evelyn, come look. There's a family of ducks by the bridge." They followed her to where a mother duck and her ducklings swam in the river's calm water near the shore. Emma was enchanted, and Daniel and Evelyn stood on either side of her, watching the simple beauty of nature in the middle of the city. "Can we come back next week to see if they're still here?" Emma asked. "Of course we can," Evelyn said. "We'll come back every week if you want." "Good. Because they need someone to check on them, to make sure they're safe." Daniel met Evelyn's eyes over Emma's head, and they shared a smile. Checking on things, making sure they're safe, it was what Daniel had done that February night when he'd run into traffic to save Bailey. It was what they'd been doing for each other ever since, protecting the fragile, valuable thing they were building together. As they walked home later that afternoon, Emma between them holding both their hands, Daniel thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate bark in the darkness to this moment of complete peace, from loss and loneliness to love and family. It hadn't been easy. Every step had required courage. Every choice had carried risk. But standing here now, with Emma chattering happily and Evelyn's hand warm in his, Daniel knew with absolute certainty that every difficult moment had been worth it. They'd taken the scattered pieces of their broken lives and built something new, something stronger for having been tested, something real. And on a cold Chicago evening nearly 2 years ago, when Daniel Moore had heard a dog bark and made the split-second decision to run toward danger instead of away from it, he'd saved more than just Bailey's life. He'd saved his own. He'd found Evelyn. He'd discovered that second chances were real, that love could find you even in the darkest moments, that family could be built from courage and choice and the refusal to let fear win. The city stretched out around them as they headed home, full of millions of stories, millions of moments where lives intersected and changed course. This was theirs, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. A single father, a powerful executive, a resilient child, and a golden retriever who'd brought them all together. And every morning when Daniel woke up next to Evelyn, when he heard Emma laughing in the next room, when Bailey padded into the bedroom to greet them, he felt the same fierce gratitude he'd felt that first night on the riverfront. Life had given him a second chance, and he'd had the courage to take it. That was enough. That was everything.